Picture a shoe. Not the soft cushioned thing on your foot right now. The one with the gel insole and the moisture-wicking lining and the arch support designed by someone with a doctorate in biomechanics who has clearly thought about your heel at some length. A medieval shoe. Stiff as a dried dog's ear, made from a single piece of hide that was tanned in oak bark and urine and whatever else the tanner had access to, turned inside out during construction, so the rough-cut edges of the leather face your skin rather than the world. Sole thin as a playing card, no heel counter, no arch support, no padding of any kind. Just honest leather standing between the ball of your foot and 400 miles of chalked Norman road. Now fill it with a strip of rough wool cloth wound around your bare foot 6 times, pulled tight enough to stay but not tight enough to cut off the blood supply to your toes, which is a distinction that sounds obvious when stated and takes approximately 3 weeks of painful education to achieve in practice. Add the smell of those 6 weeks' worth of accumulated March sweat that has been absorbed into the cloth until the cloth has given up pretending to be cloth and has become simply an extension of the foot itself. Add the particular smell of the feet underneath, which haven't been near water except when they walk through puddles, and those puddles were not water in any sense you'd be comfortable thinking about in detail. Add the weight of a longbow over one shoulder and a quiver of 24 arrows over the other and a pack on your back, and the knowledge that today you will walk another 20 miles, whether your feet have any particular interest in the project or not. That's northern France, summer of 1346. Beautiful in the way that rolling green country is beautiful when it doesn't know you're crossing it uninvited. Heavy orchards and high hedgerows thick with late summer blackberries, and stone farmhouses with their 2-foot walls built 2 centuries ago to outlast everything that's happening to them right now. A place where you could eat fresh pears in the morning and die from a septic blister by evening, and the distance between those 2 outcomes is approximately the thickness of a piece of linen cloth, applied with the right knowledge at the right time. We're going back there tonight. Not as historians examining documents behind glass in temperature-controlled reading rooms. We're living it. One march, one young man, one summer that will end at a place called Crécy en Ponthieu, in a battle that changes how wars are fought forever. Everything he touched and tasted and smelled and endured. Every step of the road and every wrinkle in the cloth and every decision made before dawn in the dark about how tight to win the heel of the left foot. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no real idea whether you're listening to this to fall asleep or because you have a very specific and passionate interest in medieval podiatry. Both are valid. You are equally my people either way. If you're wearing socks right now, take a moment to appreciate them. They represent the resolution to a problem that plagued every army, every traveller, every pilgrim, every merchant, every person who ever needed to get somewhere on their own 2 feet and couldn't afford to arrive broken. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For half a second, just half a second, you don't know where you are. Your mind comes up from somewhere blank and soft and the morning loads, all of it at once, the whole situation. Field, France, August, army, feet. Always the feet first. You're lying on your side on ground that is hard and slightly damp, even though it hasn't rained in 2 days, because ground that holds this many sleeping bodies never properly dries. Not in August. Not with the warmth of 10,000 men keeping the temperature inside the camp several degrees higher than the surrounding country. You have a rolled blanket under your head. Your feet, still in their shoes, are the first thing your mind goes to. Not because they hurt exactly, just because they're there, and they've been there all night, and they are, in the current economy of your life, your most important physical asset. The smell arrives in layers, the way smell does in a camp that's been in one place for 2 nights. First is the smoke. The fires were banked down around midnight, after the sentries took over and the camp quieted, but they're still sending thin grey threads up through the pre-dawn air, and the smell of cold ash and slow-burning oak underlies everything else. Then the horses, staked in lines 50 yards north of where you sleep, producing the smell that horses produce at a volume proportional to their number, which is substantial. Over 1,000 horses, and they've been there since yesterday afternoon, and the ground around them tells that story at a radius of about 30 yards. Then the men, the accumulated character of 10,000 bodies in wool and leather that hasn't been properly washed in 6 weeks. Each layer of sweat and dust and march and sleep pressed onto the last until what you're breathing isn't exactly a smell anymore but a texture. Something in the air that you breathe rather than smell. The particular substance of a military camp in summer. And underneath all of it, specific and close and entirely yours, your own feet. You know this smell. You've been waking up to it every morning for 6 weeks. Wool wrappings that dried on you overnight, compressed under your weight as you slept, bonded to themselves in the way that wet cloth does when it dries under pressure. It's not a pleasant smell by any objective measure. It's the smell of hard work and hard conditions and a body doing what it needs to do to keep going. It means the wrappings are still in place. It means you woke up. In the current context, those facts together constitute something approaching success. Welcome to the English Army in Normandy, the 22nd of August, 1346. Specifically to the army of Edward III of England, which landed at Saint-Vaast-la-Hougue on the 12th of July with approximately 10,000 men, 3,000 of them archers, the rest a combination of men-at-arms, cavalry, Welsh spearmen, and the various support people an army requires to function. Surgeons, smiths, fletchers, cooks, grooms, supply men, and the camp followers who manage the supply chain's more informal end. 10,000 sounds enormous until you register that the French King Philip VI has assembled an army that various accounts will put between 15 and 40,000, depending on which spy report you credit and how much you believe spies, which in this army varies considerably by individual. Philip has more men. He has chosen not to commit them yet, which means he's looking for ground, which means he's waiting for a place where his numbers give him what numbers give you when you choose correctly. The English army's strategy, such as it is, involves moving fast enough that Philip never quite gets that chance. Moving fast means walking fast. Walking fast means your feet need to be in order. 4 days from now, at a village the locals call Crécy-en-Ponthieu, the 2 armies will meet on a low ridge that Edward's commanders chose with some care, and what happens there will be written about for 6 centuries. English longbowmen on a hillside, Philip's cavalry charging uphill into the arrows, the Genoese crossbowmen routed in the first minutes, the French knights falling in their hundreds, the Black Prince distinguished in his first major battle, and Edward watching from a windmill on the ridge and declining to send reinforcements to his son because, he'll say later, the boy doesn't need them. But you don't know any of that yet. Nobody knows that yet. Right now, in the grey of the pre-dawn, all you know is that the church bells in the village half a mile south haven't rung yet, which means it's not yet dawn, which means you have 20 minutes or so before someone starts shouting. You use those 20 minutes. Your name is Thomas. Thomas Ashe, of Bridgewater in Somerset, 17 years old, arrived at Southampton Harbour on the 11th of July with a longbow of good English yew that you've had for 3 years, and that fits your draw length exactly, because your father spent a morning with the bowyer in Bridgewater to make sure of it. A quiver of 24 arrows fletched with grey goose feathers, a linen shirt, a wool tunic, a leather belt with a knife, and approximately nothing else. No connections, no money in reserve, no experience of war except the practice grounds and the autumn hunting, and the competitions at the summer market where you've placed first or second every year since you were 12. No experience of what your feet would need to be to get through this campaign. That was the education that started the first day and hasn't stopped. Before water, before food, before prayers, if you're going to be honest about the order, which you probably should be because God is presumably aware of the order regardless. Before anything else in the morning, you deal with the feet. This is what William established on the first full day on campaign, before you'd even reached the first objective inland from the landing beach, when he looked at the men around him with the assessing eye of someone who has done this many times and can see the problems forming like weather on the horizon. William, you'll meet him properly in a moment, but understand now the essential thing. He is 44 years old and has survived 4 separate campaigns in Scotland and the early stages of this war in France, and he is alive at 44, not because he is unusually lucky or unusually skilled with a weapon, though he is both of those things, but because he knows certain things at a level below thinking, at the level of muscle and habit, and the specific intelligence that accumulates in a body through decades of exactly this. And the most fundamental of those things is deal with your feet before anything else in the morning, without exception, without shortcut, without the pragmatic compromise that seems reasonable at 5 in the morning when the horizontal position has become extremely persuasive. A man who neglects his feet on campaign is a man who slows the column in a week. In 2 weeks he's being helped along. In 3 weeks he's not helping anyone. William has watched it happen. Not to weak men or stupid men. To men who are strong and capable, and who made the small daily decision to not address the small daily problem. And the small daily problems accumulated into something that ended their campaign faster than any French soldier could have managed. You sit up carefully. The man sleeping on your left is Jack Stewart, 23, from Taunton, who's been on one previous raid into Brittany, and who sleeps with the complete dedication of someone who has decided that consciousness is an entirely optional condition until demanded. He makes a sound that contains information about how deeply asleep he is and doesn't move. You edge your feet off the blanket edge and begin to unwind. The wool wrappings are stiff. They dried overnight, compressed under your weight, and the layers have bonded to each other in the way that wet wool does when it dries under pressure, and they don't peel away so much as require convincing. You work your thumb under the outer edge of the right foot's wrap first. Right foot first. Always. You settled on this order in week 2 and have maintained it since. Not because you can articulate a reason, but because consistency in the morning reduces the number of decisions you need to make when you're not fully awake. You peel the wrapping from the foot slowly, from outside inward, not pulling but easing it away from itself. Day 6 of the campaign you pulled and took skin with the cloth, a strip of epidermis from the outside of your right heel that required 3 days of careful management afterward. You learned. You peel now. The wrapping comes away in a long spiral, maybe 4 feet of grey-going wool with darker patches where it was closest to the skin, and you set it aside. Then the foot. You hold it up in the early dark and you look at it. This is not vanity. This is the morning's most important diagnostic. You've been trained by 6 weeks of consequences to see your feet clearly, to know what you're looking for and to assess what you find without either panic or denial. Right heel, there's a pad of toughened skin where a blister formed and drained and healed at day 9. You press it. Distant complaint. Nothing alarming. The skin is intact. The old blister site is not reforming. Right big toe, the nail is loose. It's been loose since day 15 when a stone on the chalk road hit it hard enough to separate the nail bed from the nail. It's going to come off eventually and grow back eventually, and in the meantime it moves very slightly with each step, which you feel inside the shoe as a tiny oscillation, present but contained. The skin around the nail margin is not red, not hot, not swollen in the way that means something is establishing itself. You test it carefully with your thumbnail. The toe objects in a routine way. The toe does not alarm you. Between the toes of the right foot, fine, clean, left foot, you unwind the left wrapping with the same care and look at it with slightly more attention. Because the left heel is the current situation. Yesterday morning it was just a warm spot, an area of slightly elevated temperature at the outer edge of the heel where the wrapping had been running slightly tight, and when you readjusted the tension the warmth diminished. Yesterday afternoon the warmth came back, and by the evening stop there was a faint sense of fluid gathering, not visible yet, but palpable under the skin when you pressed. This morning you press the edge of the heel and feel the blister. It's there. Not large, not formed to the point of firmness yet. The walls are still soft when you push the edge, which means it hasn't finished forming, which means specific things about what you do next. You'll get to that. Between the 4th and 5th toe of the left foot, you check carefully. 3 days ago this was raw. 3 days of careful morning grease and correct padding, and the kind of attention that makes the difference between a small problem staying small and a small problem becoming the reason someone carries you. Now, the skin is new and thin and pink and sensitive, but it is no longer raw. You got there. You managed it down. Left foot, ball, chronically sore, has been since week 3, will be until England. You've stopped registering it as specific information, and it has become simply background. The constant low frequency of a foot that has walked several hundred miles on Norman roads and is noting this fact without committing to drama. You set the foot down. Now the preparation. You reach into the pack at your side and find the pottery jar. It holds maybe 3 tablespoons of something that William mixed together on the 3rd day of the campaign from ingredients assembled with a speed and certainty that suggested he had done this before, repeatedly, with results that justified the method. Rendered mutton fat. The kind that comes in blocks from the supply wagons and needs melting over a fire before it becomes usable. Beeswax that William produced from somewhere in his own kit, a small piece of it, enough to stiffen the fat slightly and make it hold where it's applied rather than running off under the day's heat, and dried rosemary ground fine, the smell of which is the thing that hits you first when you open the jar, clean and herbal and slightly medicinal, and under it the honest animal smell of rendered fat. 2 fingers in. You start with the right heel. The pace goes on in small circular motions, the pads of your fingers pressing it into the skin, working it into the cracks. Your heels are cracked. They've been cracked since week 2, and will be cracked until the campaign ends and possibly longer. The combination of chalk road through thin leather soles and the cycle of wetting and drying and wetting again has produced fissures in the heel skin that range from barely visible to things you can put your fingernail into, and the paste does for them what sealant does for masonry. It fills the fissures and prevents them from deepening and prevents the particular problem that occurs when a heel crack goes deep enough to reach the dermis, which is both painful and dangerous, and which you know about because you've seen it in 2 other men and seen what the subsequent recovery requires. Right heel done. Ball of the foot, the arch, which has performed well beyond your expectations, getting the paste anyway because the arch that gets maintenance continues to perform well, and the arch that doesn't is one bad step away from the kind of condition that stops campaigns. Both sides of each toe, between every toe without exception. Then the left foot with more paste at the heel to account for the situation there, and extra care between the 4th and 5th toes, and careful attention to the ball of the foot which always needs more than the right. The wrappings. This is the skill that took the longest to develop, longer than anything else, longer than learning to assess what you were looking at or how to dress a wound, or when a problem was still minor versus when it had become something larger. The physical technique of the wrap itself. The flat wrap is what you did at the start. Horizontal passes around the foot from toe to ankle, nice and even, everything the same tension, everything aligned. It looks correct. It feels secure when you apply it at 5 in the morning in the cool of the early camp. Then you go uphill, and the toe box compresses as your foot angles up, and the horizontal wraps press the toes together wrong. Then you go downhill, and the heel wants to slide toward the toe of the shoe, and the horizontal wraps have nothing in their geometry that addresses this specific force. By hour 3, the wrap has shifted. By hour 5, the shift has created a crease. By hour 7, the crease has become a friction point, and the friction point is where tomorrow morning's blister assessment begins. The pyramid wrap is what William showed you at the start of week 3, after looking at your feet 2 evenings in a row and seeing the same pattern. Heel migration, toe compression, friction points at predictable locations. He sat down and took off his own shoe and wrapped his own foot in front of you, slowly and with commentary, and you watched the difference take shape under his hands. The pyramid starts at the toes, 1 pass at the base of the toes, not tight, just seated, establishing the foundation. Then the wrap angles upward and backward, running diagonally across the instep toward the heel. At the heel it crosses, 1 pass over the heel from the right, 1 from the left, making an X at the heel point. This crossing is what changes everything. The heel is now locked between 2 diagonal tensions that come from opposite directions, and when the foot flex is going uphill, the tension adjusts dynamically without losing the heel, and when the foot angles down, the heel is still held. Then the remaining cloth goes up the ankle twice and ties off. You do this now, in the dark, by feel. Both feet. You've done it every morning for 3 weeks. Your hands know the shape of your own feet the way you know the shape of the bow's grip. By accumulated repetition until the knowing lives in the hands rather than the mind. Right foot, standard pyramid. Check tension at the heel. Check tension at the toe box. Press your thumb against the instep to test the overall. Right. Left foot. The pyramid, with an extra crossing at the heel because of the blister situation. The blister is under the heel pad you'll apply, and the extra crossing holds the pad precisely in place, while also adding the structural security that might prevent the situation from worsening. You set a small folded piece of clean linen over the blister site, pad it with the extra thickness of the fold, and then the crossing goes over it, and the rest of the wrap builds around it. This is more complicated than the standard application. You've been doing it for 2 days. Both feet wrapped. Both shoes on, right first, left second. The shoes are turnshoe construction, which you know now and didn't know 6 weeks ago. built inside out and reversed so the smooth grain leather faces outward and the flesh side faces the foot. After 6 weeks, the inside has been polished smooth by the wrappings in your feet, and the leather has taken on a dark patina and a particular smell that is entirely and specifically yours. They cost 4p from a cobbler in Bristol, who looked at your feet before he showed you anything, the way a good cobbler does, and who noted that the left runs a quarter size larger than the right, which information you didn't know what to do with until you were on the road, and it became apparent why it matters. The extra thickness at the left toe takes up the space. The shoe fits. Not comfortably, you've gone past expecting comfortable, but correctly. You stand. The body protests. Lower back, knees, the shoulder where the quiver sits all day. But the feet are as prepared as they're going to be. The grease is working. The cloth is in place. The heel has its pad and its crossing. You can walk. That is everything. The camp is waking up with a gradual increase in volume that large collections of men use instead of discreet alarm. First shifting in sleep, then coughing, the deep rattle of men who have breathed 6 weeks of chalk dust and campfire smoke, then voices, low and rough, just the sounds of orientation and grievance. Then the sergeants move and the language becomes considerably more direct. Water first. The barrels near the north edge of the camp were filled last night from the stream 2 fields over, and the water in them is not what you'd choose if choice were available. But the alternatives are either nothing or the stream itself unboiled, and the stream unboiled is a decision that has removed itself from the menu after watching what it did to a man from Kent in the 2nd week. You fill your water skin and drink what it holds and fill it again. 'Cause the first mile of march is always a good mile for water, and the 4th hour is never a good time to wish you'd drunk more in the morning. The man in front of you at the water barrel is Rob, a Fletcher from Gloucestershire, who is missing 2 fingers on the left hand from a soaring accident before the army took him, which turned out not to matter for archery, because the bow grip is on the right, and the left-hand hold uses fingers Rob still has. Rob turns when you fill and assesses you with the economical gaze of a man checking his inventory. Feet, he says. Good, you say. Left heel has a start on something. He nods, processing this, filing it. This is the essential morning exchange in this army, and most men don't know why. Not the formation orders, not the direction of march, not even, frankly, what they'll eat. The first real question is always feet. Because without the feet, the rest of the questions don't matter. William is sitting where he always is in the mornings, on a doubled piece of sacking, cross-legged, eating the bread allocation, looking at nothing in particular, which in William's case means looking at everything. He is a compact man. Not short, but solid in the way that bodies become when physical work has been their primary experience for decades. Consolidated, nothing wasted. The kind of build that doesn't look remarkable until someone needs to cover 20 miles in August heat, and you watch who's still moving properly at mile 15. He's 44 years old. In this army that is its own credential, requiring no elaboration. He's been on the Scottish campaigns. He was at Morlaix in 42. He's alive. Among the men who are at those places there are fewer alive than were there, and the difference between them and William is complicated, but starts, as most things with William start, with the feet. He looks up when you approach. His eyes are the colour of slate after rain, and they do the same check Rob's did. Not your face, your gait. How you're walking. Wrapped proper, he says. Yes, left heel has something starting. Blister. Starting one. Soft-walled still. He sets his bread down, which is a gesture that means he's giving this his full attention. Show me. You sit on the ground in front of him and extend your left foot. He takes the ankle in a hand that is noticeably stronger than its appearance suggests, applies pressure in specific places: the outside of the heel, where the blister's under the pad, the margin around it, above it toward the ankle, the ball of the foot below it. He's checking the boundary, seeing what's contained and what isn't. Temperature, he asks. Normal at the margin, no spreading. When did it start? Yesterday afternoon. Warm spot at the break. By evening there was fluid. He releases the foot. Good, he says. You caught it at the right time. If it's still soft-walled this morning, you've got most of the day before you need to decide about draining. Check it at the midday stop. If the walls firm up and you're in pain, drain then. If it's firm and not causing problems, carry through to evening. Either way, don't ignore it. And if it opens on its own during the march, then you dress it immediately when you stop before the boot goes back on. The open blister is cleaner to treat than the closed one that's been infected by road dirt getting in through a spontaneous rupture. He goes back to his bread. You sit beside him and eat yours. The bread this morning is from whatever mill or oven the scouts found operational in the last village. Dark and dense and slightly sour. The crumb tight in the way of bread made quickly with flour that has been in storage longer than ideal. You eat it because it exists. On 3 days of this campaign there was no bread, and on those days the existence of bread retroactively became significant. We'll be moving early, William says. How early? They're watering the horses before the kitchen fires are up. He gestures toward the horse lines without looking. That's a tell. They want to cover ground before the heat of the day, which tells me they know something about the road ahead. How far? 15 miles to something with water, maybe more. Philip's got his advance guard within 2 days of us according to last night's message. He pauses. He's found something, or he's close to finding it. This is the thing that has been building in the background for a week. The French army that everyone knows is shadowing you. Philip moving, positioning, looking for the piece of ground that gives his numbers what he needs them to give him. The English army moving to prevent this, or to get to wherever is going to happen before Philip can fully arrange it. 2 armies and the specific mathematics of medieval warfare. Ground and numbers and the angle of attack and the sun in whose eyes. You think about this the way you think about most things that are larger than your immediate management, briefly, and then you put it down. Your immediate management is today's march. Your feet are your immediate management. Get more food, William says. Hard march today. The porridge line is already forming. The porridge is oats boiled in water that was itself boiled the night before, because raw water has been definitively established as a risk that the army's management can't absorb. It has the consistency of something that made an early commitment to being paced, and has been faithful to that commitment. It tastes of oats and smoke and the iron pot and nothing else. It is hot. You eat all of it, and you eat it quickly, because the formation order is going to come before people expect it, and standing in line with an empty bowl when the march order arrives is a specific kind of embarrassing that you've learned to prevent. The morning is becoming real now. Not the grey suggestion of morning, but actual light. August light. The kind that makes Normandy's green fields look as though they are illuminated from inside. The hedgerows are going black with blackberries. The apple orchards that line the road ahead are heavy with fruit that's weeks from ripe. The church tower in the village half a mile away is catching the first direct sun and throwing it back in the warm, particular way that old Norman stone does. The church bells ring, not just one, 3 or 4 of them, the nearest ones within walking distance starting at different times as the ringers respond to the same moment in their own way, so that the bells arrive in sequence rather than simultaneously. an overlapping cascade of bronze sound that crosses the fields and enters the camp and does what church bells always do, which is locate you in time. It is this hour, the bells say. Whatever else is happening, it is this hour. You think about the people who rang those bells before this army arrived, and who will ring them after it's gone, who are somewhere in the countryside now, having taken what they could carry, who left the doors open to prevent them being broken down, who left the cat because you can't carry a cat, who took the spinning wheel, the serious one in the farmhouse where you slept last night, and carried it however far they had to carry it to keep it out of the hands of 10,000 men who would find various uses for the wood. You put this thought down. William's advice, delivered in different words but amounting to, you can't carry the civilians with you. All you can do is keep moving. The formation order comes. Packing is fast. 6 weeks of practice and a small kit produce 5-minute packing. Bow wrapped in oiled linen, quiver checked, 24 arrows, all present, fletchings intact, no cracks in the shafts, pack with wrappings and grease jar and spare shirt and dried meat and water skin and flint and cup, blanket rolled and tied. That's everything you own right now, and it can go on your back in 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is about what you have. The column forms in the slow, imperfect way that columns form, the way everyone expects them to form imperfectly and nobody quite accepts with equanimity. There are the usual delays. There is always a wheel that needs attention. There is always a horse with the specific opinion about the morning that needs to be heard out before the horse will cooperate. There is always the relationship between digestive urgency and march schedule, which no army in history has ever fully resolved. You end up in your position, middle of the left column, Jack Stewart on your left, already alert, eyes moving along the road ahead the way they always move, the habitual scanning of a man who got surprised once and has been in a state of readiness since. Peter the miller on your right, 40 pounds heavier than anyone nearby. The kind of man whose physical presence creates a kind of local weather, warmth, moisture, the specific sound of breathing that large bodies doing sustained work produce. William is 3 positions ahead, which is where he always places himself, close enough to be found, far enough to be useful separately. The march order comes. Your first step is the honest step. Not the cheerful step and not the suffering step, but the factual one. The foot telling you what it knows after a night on the ground and a morning of preparation. Right foot. We're here. We're ready. We're watching. Left foot. We're here. We're aware of the heel situation. We're watching more carefully. The second step is better. By the 10th, the rhythm is established. By the 50th, it's running itself. The sound of the column is something you've stopped hearing individually. It's just the ambient sound of the march now, the way the sound of a river stops registering when you've been walking beside it long enough. But from inside it, when you pay the right kind of attention, you can hear it as a single thing. Purpose made audible. 10,000 people moving toward the same thing at the same speed. It has a sound that's different from the same number of people moving randomly. Purpose sounds different from absence of purpose. You can hear it. The first hour. The road is chalk this morning, which is the worst kind for feet, the best kind for pace. Chalk roads don't make mud in the rain, and don't make dust so aggressive in the dry as some roads, but they have a surface that transmits itself upward through thin soles and into the feet in a way that packed earth doesn't. The chalk has tiny ridges and edges, invisible, felt rather than seen, and every step over them is a tiny percussion against the ball of the foot. Single percussions don't matter. Multiplied over 10,000 steps, they add up to something the ball of the foot notices and remembers. The morning is cool enough that it's almost pleasant. The chalk road white in the early light. The hedgerows on both sides dense and high enough to create a corridor effect. The army flowing along it. Through the gaps where field tracks cross, you can see barley going gold in the fields, the heads bending in the small morning wind, some of the fields burned and some not. The contrast between them specific and striking. Jack Stewart, to your left, is singing. He's been singing the same repertoire since Southampton, and by now the men within earshot know every song whether they intended to or not. The current one involves a woman in Taunton whose qualities are enumerated across several verses with the specificity that only genuine regard can produce. You've heard it probably 40 times. You catch yourself filling in the words before Jack reaches them, which is how you know it's been more than 40. You count steps under it. Not deliberately, not as an activity you're performing, just a thing that runs below everything else the way a heartbeat runs below everything else. 100, 200. The count ticks over. The distance shortens by units that your mind can handle. At the 2-hour mark, the road descends into a small valley and crosses a stream on a stone bridge, single file, and you wait your turn in a queue that takes 20 minutes to clear. Below the bridge, the stream runs over gravel, the water clear enough that you can see individual stones on the bottom, the occasional flash of something silver holding in the current where the water is deepest. The urge to take your shoes off is strong and does not become action. Cold water on marching feet is a trap William described with a kind of specificity that comes from having watched people fall into it. The muscles of the foot are warm and engaged and accustomed to the temperature and the pace. Cold water seizes everything. The next 2 hours become harder than they need to be. The cold is for evening, after everything is done. Not now. You watch the water and don't put your feet in it. The 3rd hour. The road climbs out of the valley on the other side and you go up with it. Going uphill changes the foot's relationship with the shoe. The toes push forward against the toe box, more pressure at the front. The heel lifts fractionally with each step, the shoe trying to follow it but not quite. The slight separation being where friction begins. The extra heel crossing holds. The pyramid wrap does what it was designed to do on terrain change. The diagonal tensions adjust rather than resist, accommodating the angle without losing their geometry. William told you about terrain change in week 3. Surface transition is underrated as a difficulty, he said. Most men think the hard day is the long day. It isn't. The hard day is the day where you go from chalk to mud and back to chalk, or from flat road to hill country and back, or from forest track to open road. The foot has calibrated itself. When the ground changes, the calibration is briefly wrong. Briefly wrong on a foot that's been working all day is how small things become large things. You've tested this. He's right in a way that's verifiable by experience. The transition hours are the vulnerable hours. At the top of the hill, you step to the side of the road for 30 seconds, partly to let the column flow, partly to look. From here, the army is visible in both directions for almost 2 miles. North along the road ahead, the column stretches out of sight around a curve. South behind you, it comes from somewhere over another rise, and it's enormous. Not as an abstraction, but as a visible fact from here. 10,000 people and their horses and carts spread along a white chalk road through green Normandy country, the dust of their passage hanging in the air above them like a collective breath. To the east, a smear of smoke on the horizon. Someone in the advance party made a decision the command will have notes about later and will not be able to retroactively prevent. To the north and east, rolling country going to a horizon that doesn't reveal itself. Philip is somewhere in that direction. His scouts are certainly watching this road, are certainly reporting this dust. The information about where this army is by now is Philip's information. What he does with it is what determines the next few days. You rejoin the column. The woodland begins a mile after the hill and changes the march entirely. Shade. First and most immediately, shade. The specific and physical relief of shade after 3 hours of chalk road in August sun. You feel it as a cooling of the skin on your forearms and the back of your neck and across your scalp, an actual physical change in temperature, and the involuntary response is something close to pleasure, not comfort. The pack is still heavy and the feet are still working and the road is still there to be covered, but the absence of the sun is a relief that the body registers with gratitude. The road through the woodland is earth rather than chalk, and earth has moisture in it from the shade, and the moisture changes what the road does under your feet. A small give with each step, the earth yielding fractionally, a compression that chalk never offers. Your feet register this. The cumulative percussion against the ball of the foot that chalk road delivers eases back. The sounds of the woodland are different. Enclosed, concentrated, brought close by the trees on both sides. The column's sound, which spread and dissipated on the open road, collects itself under the canopy. You can hear individual conversations for the first time in hours. You can hear Jack Steward's left boot, which has a defect at the heel seam that produces a small regular sound every fourth step, like someone very methodically and very quietly clearing their throat. You can hear the stream before you see it. Stonebridge crossing, single file, 20-minute wait. This is the second stream today, cleaner than the first, and below the bridge you can see the bottom gravel and something silver, holding in the current under the deepest arch. Grufford the Welshman is in front of you in the queue. He's spent the waiting time at the edge of the path, crouching, examining the ground in the shadow of the oaks where a small patch of dark green moss clings to the stones above the water. You watch him work a piece free with his fingers, gently, not tearing it but peeling it from the stone the way skin peels from skin, keeping the mat intact. He holds it up, examines it, turns it in his fingers. It's perhaps the size of his palm. Sphagnum, you say? He looks up. His English wears its origins the way a man wears old clothes, competently, with character. Close enough, he says. Not exactly, but similar family, similar properties. Good enough for the heel. How do you know which kind? He looks at you in the way that people look when you've asked a question that reveals a gap in your knowledge so large that they're assessing where to begin. The texture, he says, the colour, the way it holds water. Sphagnum holds water in its own cells, not just in the spaces between. You press it and it doesn't drain immediately, it holds. He demonstrates pressing the piece between his fingers. A small amount of water comes out, but the moss retains a visible moisture. The other kinds drain. Sphagnum holds, and the holding is what matters. For the antiseptic property, he nods, but with a qualifier in the gesture, a slight tilt of the head that means yes, but more than that. It's more than the infection question, he says. The texture, the way it doesn't compact under pressure the way wool does. Wool pressed against a heel in a shoe for 8 hours goes flat, becomes nothing. The sphagnum resists compression better. It stays soft. The cushioning lasts. Your grandfather told you this. His grandfather before him, and before that, going back as far as there are grandfathers in the hills. He pockets the moss carefully. The knowledge of the bog plants. In Wales, in wet country, these things are known the way the names of fields are known. Not written, just carried. He steps onto the bridge. You follow. On the other side, the woodland continues for another half-mile, and then opens out into farmland again, and the chalk road returns, and the sun returns with it, and you're back in August with the shade behind you. 4th hour. This is the hour when the morning's investment either pays off or reveals its gaps. You're warm now in the way that working bodies get warm. A thorough warmth. Not the surface warmth of sun on skin, but the internal warmth of muscles that have been operating for 4 hours. Your feet inside their wrappings are warm, have been warm for 2 hours. The grease that went on in the cool of the morning is doing different work now in the heat of the afternoon than it did then. Somewhat more liquid, somewhat more mobile, still protecting but differently than it was. The wrappings themselves have compressed under use, losing some of the springiness they had when fresh. They've been doing this every hour. By hour 8 they'll be significantly more compressed than they are now, which means the protection they offer against friction is reduced compared to the morning, which is why you re-grease and re-examine at the midday stop, and why the evening examination is as important as the morning's. The left heel is there, present. The pad is in place. The blister is under it. When you think about it, you can feel it, but it's not demanding attention in the way that a problem requiring immediate action demands attention. It's more like a low note in a piece of music, part of what's there, not drowning anything else out. William appears beside you, working his way back from 3 positions ahead. He does this periodically throughout the march, a check-in that's never announced and never elaborate and always covers what needs covering. Tell me what you know about the Romans, you say. He considers this as he walks. He considers everything this way, seriously without hurry, as if the question deserves the same quality of attention as the road. The legions, he says, 20 miles a day on good road and 15 on bad consistently over decades of continuous campaigning from Britain to North Africa to the eastern deserts, the most sustained marching performance in history. In sandals. In Caliga. Not what you'd think of as sandals. Multi-layered leather soles with hobnails for grip on stone roads. Straps over the instep and the ankle, leaving the toes visible, the heel open, not an enclosed shoe, and the specific foot covering underneath. Linen wrappings for the enlisted men in some units. Sewn sock-like bags called udones in others, depending on the unit, the commander, the climate, and the individual soldier's preference. The specifics varied. The principle didn't. And they had someone who checked feet. The medicus. Each sentry had one. His function was medical in the general sense. Wounds, fever, whatever the sentry's men presented with. But feet specifically were a daily duty in the better organised units. He walked the line every morning. William's voice has the particular quality it gets when he's describing something he's thought about considerably. And the essential thing about the foot inspection was not the inspection itself. It was the culture the inspection represented. An individual soldier making a private decision about whether to report a problem or ignore it will often ignore it. The same soldier knowing that a trained pair of eyes will look at his feet every morning will treat every problem as a reportable problem. Because the consequences of hiding a problem and having it found are worse than the consequences of the problem itself. Were they? Sometimes actually worse. A legionary who was caught concealing a foot wound that could have been treated early and wasn't was, in some units, marked for the next rotation of the worst duties available, because the damage to the unit from one man going lame at mile 15 was significant. The unit had to slow, or relieve him, or carry him. None of these outcomes were free. What about the men-at-arms in this army? Do they have anything like it? A short sound from William that isn't quite a laugh. The men-at-arms in this army have armoured feet, sabatons, steel plates over the shoe, articulated to allow walking, heavy enough to change your gait in ways you have to account for. And they stuff the sabaton with something before it goes on, straw, usually, or dried grass, or wool if they have it. Because metal directly against the foot is worse than leather directly against the foot, and leather directly against the foot is already not ideal. The stuffing is the same principle as the wrapping, just different materials applied to a different circumstance. You think about this. Straw in a steel boot, dried grass in an armoured foot covering. The same impulse, adapted. What about the farthest back you know of, you ask? Before Rome, before armies? He's quiet for a moment. You've asked this question before and he's given partial answers. Today he seems inclined to be more complete. The principle is probably as old as people, he says. The foot is the body's point of contact with the ground, and the ground wants to do things to the foot that the foot would prefer not to have done. Anyone who had to walk further than they could comfortably walk barefoot was confronted with this. The solutions they found depended entirely on what they had available, which was, in warm, dry places, plant fibres, grass, leaves, bark strips woven or plaited, sandal-type constructions that kept the sole of the foot off the ground, which is the primary danger in dry country. The thorns and sharp stones, in cold, wet places, animal skins, whatever was closest to hand that held warmth and kept the wet out. The first shoes in northern Europe are probably direct skins wrapped around the foot and tied, and the first foot wrapping inside them is probably the raw wool or dried moss that was already available. And the grease. The grease is everywhere. Every tradition, everywhere, has a version of grease. He pauses. There is something close to a universal answer in the grease. Animal fat is available wherever there are animals, which is everywhere there are people. The application of fat to a foot before it goes into covering is probably not an invention. It's probably a rediscovery that happens independently in every tradition. Because the foot presents the same problem in every culture, and fat presents the same solution, he drops back to his position. Fifth hour. The truth hour, William calls it. This is where the performance stops and what's actually true about your feet emerges from the management you've been applying to it. The left heel, louder. The blister is more present now, not painful but unignorable. A pressure under each step at that specific point. The pad is holding. The wrap is holding. The blister is there and it's contained, and it has not changed its character in a way that requires immediate response. You hold this assessment and walk. The right toenail, shifting. Not more than before, but continuous. The small oscillation that every step produces, present and acknowledged and not worse. Ball of the left foot, chronic, stable, background. The second thing the truth hour reveals is the lower back. It's there now in a way it wasn't in the first 4 hours, a specific pressure between the fourth and fifth lumbar vertebrae that builds from the pack on your back and the slight forward lean of the march and the accumulated repetition of a few 100,000 steps over 6 weeks. You adjust the pack straps for the third time today, shifting the weight slightly higher, and get 2 miles of relief before the load settles again. The fifth hour also reveals what the day's march is going to cost in aggregate. You can feel the difference between how you felt at hour 1 and how you feel at hour 5, and the trajectory of that difference tells you something about where you'll be at hour 8. This arithmetic of fatigue is something you've learned to do without thinking, the way you learn to count steps without thinking, a running background process that updates its estimate based on incoming information. You'll be tired tonight. This is not information. This is the definition of what tonight is. Peter the miller on your right is breathing with the intention that Peter always brings to things. Peter is the strongest man in your immediate vicinity in terms of absolute physical capacity, the ability to lift heavy things and apply force directly. Peter is not the best marcher. He burns too much energy per step, generates too much heat, and the heat makes him work harder, which generates more heat. He manages this. He's been managing it for 6 weeks. But hour 5 reveals what hour 1 conceals, and hour 5 with Peter involves a quality of sustained effort that requires respect. You haven't spoken much today. The march doesn't usually produce conversation in the way that the evenings do. In the morning there's effort and orientation. In the afternoon there's endurance. Conversation happens at the stops and in the camps, where the body has a moment to think about something other than itself. But Gruford, who has moved from his position in the column to walk beside you for a stretch, is talking. Grufford talks during marches in the same way that some people hum without knowing they're doing it. Not for the benefit of an audience, but for the rhythm of it. For the way a voice moving keeps the mind from settling too deeply into the march and losing itself there. My grandfather walked from Gwynedd to Hereford, he says, 3 days on Welsh roads, which are not roads in the sense this army would call a road. Hill tracks and ford crossings and paths through country that doesn't want to be crossed. He did it 4 times a year. Markets. What did he put on his feet? Wool, always wool. But he had a specific preparation. He soaked the wool in water from a particular spring near his village and let it dry on a warm stone before winding it. He said the water from that spring had something in it that the wool absorbed and kept. I never understood what. The spring was in a bog. Probably the water had something from the peat. Tannins, you say, not certain but guessing. Maybe. I don't know the word. What I know is that his feet were remarkable for a man his age. When he died, he was 63. His feet looked like the feet of a 40-year-old. The heels were uncalloused. The toes were straight. For someone who had walked the equivalent of... He pauses, calculating. Many times to Rome and back. Did he teach you the preparation? He tried. I could never find the right spring, or the right water, so I found the moss instead, and that was the knowledge he gave me in a different form. He's quiet for a moment. The knowledge changes form. The principle stays the same. He drops back into his own part of the column. 6th hour. The road has turned from chalk to packed earth at some point in the last mile, and you registered the change as relief in the feet before you noticed it consciously. The percussion against the ball of the foot that chalk produces is simply absent on packed earth. The feet work differently. They're still absorbing impact, but differently. The earth giving slightly. The impact distributed over a larger area and a longer time. It's measurably better. You know this because your feet tell you. They've been telling you things about road surfaces for 6 weeks, and you've learned to read it the way you read the sky for weather. This is good ground. This will extend the useful life of the day's preparation by an hour, maybe more. The land has opened up from the woodland. The road runs through cultivated fields that are empty of people but full of late summer abundance. Peas going dry in their pods on the stalk. Cabbages enormous and tight. the root crops in their ridges, the tops marking what's underground. An army could eat well from these fields, and portions of the army have been doing exactly that since before you entered this parish. To the east, a river. Silver flat in the afternoon light, moving slowly, the willows along its banks having a slow, animated conversation with the light wind. The river means a crossing at some point. A crossing means either a bridge or a ferry or a wade, and wading in August is possible, but wading with heavy packs and weapons is not a thing you look forward to, and William has said nothing about it, which means either there's a bridge or this isn't today's problem. There's a bridge. You can see its arch from the road, stone and old, and the column ahead is slowing as it approaches, the universal symptom of a bottleneck approaching, while waiting to cross an incident. The man 3 rows ahead in the column, the one who has been limping on and off since the 4th hour with the compensating stride that puts his right shoulder down, stops walking. This is notable because people don't stop walking in a marching column unless they have to. The column is a momentum system. Stopping requires a reason. The man sits down on the road's edge. The column flows around him the way a stream flows around a stone, adapting its shape to the obstruction. The men immediately behind him spreading to either side and rejoining ahead. The sergeant 3 rows back sees it and works forward. Up, the sergeant says, not unkindly, not brutally, just up. The man says something you can't hear from here. The sergeant crouches beside him. You're close enough now to see what the sergeant sees, the man's right boot coming off. The sergeant is taking it off, which means the man wasn't going to take it off himself, which means this was further along than the man admitted to himself. The boot comes away and the sergeant looks at the foot, and you can see from the sergeant's posture what he's seeing without seeing it yourself. The sergeant calls for one of the army surgeons who ride with the column. This is a bad sign. The surgeon is for things beyond what a sergeant can address. The column continues around them both, and you move past and lose them behind you. He'll be in a cart by evening, Jack says beside you. Will he be all right? Depends what it is. If it's just a bad blister that opened and got infected, they can treat it. If it's been infected for a week and he's been walking on it, he shrugs. He should have talked to someone. Surgeon, medic, someone. This is the thing William told you in the first week. The thing about the Roman medicus and the culture of reporting. An individual making a private decision about whether to report a problem will often choose not to report it. Because reporting feels like weakness. Because stopping feels like failure. Because the immediate cost of admitting the problem seems higher than the immediate cost of continuing. Until the cost of continuing becomes visible. Until the sergeant has to crouch by the road with the boot coming off. The bridge. Stone. Single arch. The kind built by someone who intended it to last and was right. The river below it is moving at a good pace. The water a muddy brown from the chalk upstream. You cross in the flow of the column, your steps ringing slightly differently on the stone, and you're past. The 7th hour. The worst hour. Consistent, never not the worst hour. Not because anything specific happens in the 7th hour. Nothing specific happens. It's just the hour when the gap between what the body wants and what it's being asked to do is widest. When the body's argument for stopping is most thoroughly developed and most articulately presented. The soreness that was manageable in the 4th hour has accumulated compound interest. The back that was adjustable in the 5th hour has arrived at a position it's willing to maintain but not willing to enjoy. The feet, inside their by now considerably compressed wrappings, are doing their jobs but have their own position on the matter. You develop in the 7th hour a specific kind of attention, not to the things around you, not to the conversation if there is any, not to the road ahead, to yourself, to the running inventory that the body produces. Is this just tired, or is this a new problem? Is this a thing to address now, or a thing that can wait? Is the heel worse, or is the heel the same, and you're just paying it more attention because you're in the 7th hour and paying things more attention? The heel is the same. You know the difference by now between same and worse, and it's the same. The lower back is the same. The toenail is the same. The ball of the left foot is the same. You're just in the 7th hour. This is what the 7th hour is. It passes as it always does, not because anything improves, but because the 8th hour requires the 7th to have been completed first. The 8th hour brings the village. You see the church tower first, over the tree line, and then the rooftops, and then the road curves and you're in the main street of a Norman village that has made the decision that most Norman villages in the path of the English army have made, to be elsewhere. The doors are open. The hearths are cold, but recently cold. The cats have decided to stay, because cats operate on their own scheduling, and this army doesn't appear to have anything specific against cats. The dog in the centre of the main road has not made a decision yet. The halt order comes. Set up camp. Water at the mill on the northern edge. Firewood from the barn. Don't burn the buildings. Everyone nods at the last instruction in the way that is not quite agreement, but is at least acknowledgement. You find a space in the yard of a farmhouse near the south end of the village, stone walls, north-facing in shadow this time of day. There's a large flat stone near the base of the south wall that will work as a seat, and is already being assessed by 3 other men who are all moving toward it from different directions. You get there first because you knew what you were looking for. Shoes off. Both feet. This examination. Right foot. The toenail is looser. The skin around it is intact. Not red. Not hot. The ball of the foot is at its daily baseline of chronic sore. The heel is fine. The wrap is seated. The right foot has had a good day. Left foot. You peel back to the heel section. Lift the pad. Underneath, the blister. It's formed. Fully formed now. Coin-sized. The wall's firm when you press the edge. The fluid inside it clear. The skin around the margin is clean, not red, not warm to the touch outside the blister itself. Firm walls. Fluid present. No infection sign at the margin. This is the decision William described. You reach into the pack. The knife. Flame from the small candle in its tin. Blade held until the soot clears, then cooled to hand not hot. You're precise about this. The margin of the blister at its lowest point where the skin is thinnest and the pressure is highest. A small puncture, not deep, through the outermost layer of skin. The fluid runs out clear, and you press gently from all sides to help it along, and the pressure releases in that specific clean way that correctly drained blister releases, like a held breath exhaled. Then the grease. More than usual, over the drain site. Then a clean pad of cloth folded twice. Then the heel crossing from scratch, the pad between the heel and the outer layer of the wrap, locked in place by the pyramid crossing. You stand. Walk 3 steps to check the feel. The pad is there and it's in place, and the heel is better than it was an hour ago. The problem is not solved, but it's managed, which in current circumstances is the same as solved. William appears. He looks at the foot. He looks at the drain site through the open heel area of the wrap before you've closed it. Clean, he says. Yes. Good. Grease again before you sleep tonight, and again first thing in the morning before the wrap goes on. I will. He sits down beside you on the flat stone, taking it from its secondary use as a surface to be evaluated, and giving it its primary use as a place to sit. He takes off his own shoes and does his own examination with the same systematic attention he applies to everything, running his thumbs over each foot in turn, pressing in specific places, checking the condition of the skin that has been doing this work for 6 weeks. Tell me something, you say. Ask. You said before that the knowledge goes back as far as there are people, that everyone has always known about this, but there has to be a gap somewhere where someone figured it out, where someone was the first to put something specific between their foot and the ground, where someone discovered that certain moss was better than other moss. He's quiet for a moment, working the grease into his right heel. You're looking for the origin, he says. There isn't one origin. There are 100,000 separate origins, every individual in every generation who found a solution to the problem independently. The origins weren't discoveries that spread. They were rediscoveries. The same answer, found again and again. Why the same answer? Because there aren't many answers to give. The foot has a specific shape and specific vulnerabilities, and the solutions to its problems are constrained by physics. What works for a foot is determined by the physics of feet, friction and moisture and pressure. The solutions are whatever reduces those 3 things, and the materials that reduce those things in the right way are limited. Fat reduces friction and acts as a moisture barrier. Soft, resilient material reduces pressure and manages moisture. Firm support prevents the wrong kinds of movement. Every culture that solved the foot problem arrived at some version of these same 3 things, because those are the 3 things, and there's nothing else that those things could be. He works the grease between his toes. The sphagnum, he continues, Grufford's moss. It works because it's soft and it holds moisture in itself rather than letting it transfer to the skin, and it has something in it that acts against infection. 3 separate properties. Any one of them alone would make it worth using. Together they make it exceptional. He pauses. The Romans didn't know about sphagnum moss. They used linen because they had linen everywhere. But if you showed a Roman centurion what sphagnum does and gave him access to it, he would have used it immediately. The knowledge of why wouldn't have been necessary. The observation of what would have been enough. That's what you meant about the knowledge being older than writing. The knowledge of what works doesn't need writing to survive. It needs only the foot of the next generation to be presented with the same problem, and the foot of the next generation will always be presented with the same problem. He looks at you. The problem is permanent. The foot is soft. The ground is not. That's all it is. Every solution is a version of addressing that. The camp settles into evening. The farmhouse yard fills with men finding their positions for the night. Fires establish themselves, starting small and growing to the generous evening burn that men who have walked 20 miles feel they've earned. The sounds of an army transitioning from the motion of the day to the stillness of the night. Boots being removed, voices loosening from the silence the march requires into the conversation that the evening allows. The cook who operates the nearest of the supply wagons has produced something that involves salt pork and dried peas and water in large quantities, and the result is a stew of a quality that ranges between adequate and notable, depending on where you are in the serving sequence. You're far enough back that the serving sequence has had time to concentrate the elements, which makes the stew richer, but also more likely to contain whatever was resting at the bottom of the pot. You eat it. Jack Stewart is beside you, also eating, talking between mouthfuls about the card game he intends to win after supper from the men 3 rows over, who think they're good at cards and are about to have that assessment corrected. Jack has a gift for cards that he's careful not to advertise because advertised gifts stop being gift quickly. Peter the Miller is eating with the focused commitment he brings to everything, systematically working through his portion with the expression of a man who has developed a respectful working relationship with food and intends to honour it. Grufford is across the fire, the moss he collected at the bridge crossing now arranged around his left heel in a neat pad, held in place by a loosely wound strip of cloth. He's going to sleep with it on. He's told you this before, and the results are visible in the condition of his feet, better than they should be for someone who has walked this far. The moss works overnight, you ask. He looks up. The moss works especially overnight. During the day the foot moves, the moss compresses and shifts. At night the foot is still, the moss maintains contact without interruption. In the morning the skin has responded. Responded how? Softer. The cracks in the heel smaller. The areas that were dry and beginning to fissure less so, he shrugs. I can't explain the mechanism. I can show you the results. You think about what it would be to have access to enough sphagnum to use it every evening. The difference it might make over 6 weeks versus 6 days of occasional access. Grufford's heels versus your own. The answer is in the comparison. If I could find more of it, you say, look for it at the margins of standing water, shaded hollows that stay damp, along the north side of streams where the sun doesn't reach. It grows wherever there's sufficient moisture and the sun doesn't dry it out. He tilts his head. This country is drier than Wales, but it's not all dry. You'll find it if you look. My grandfather never told me about moss, you say. He told me about shoes. He was a cobbler. He told me about the difference between good lasts and poor ones, and how to identify quality leather, and which cobblers in Somerset were worth their prices. Good knowledge, Grufford says. Different knowledge. He never said anything about what to put inside the shoes, because he assumed shoes were sufficient. Most people do until they have to walk far enough to find out they're not. This is true. You assumed it too. The shoes you arrived with were the best you'd ever owned. And you arrived with the assumption that best shoes meant adequately equipped feet, and you discovered the gap between these two things at approximately mile 4 of the first real March day. By mile 8 it was fully visible. By mile 15 you understood the problem. By day 5 you were listening to anything William said about it with complete attention. The fire burns down as the evening progresses. The conversation around it follows the particular trajectory of end-of-day Yarmy conversation. Starts with the day's details, the road and the distances and who saw what, moves through general complaints which are more performance than genuine grievance, settles into the quieter territory of a longer thoughts and home and what comes after. Jack talks about Taunton. Not the song this time, but the actual place. The market he used to work at, the people he knew, the particular atmosphere of a Somerset market town in autumn, when the cider season is coming and the air smells of it for miles. Peter talks about his father's mill, the sound of the millstones, the particular flour they produced from the local wheat, different from any other mill's flour in the county. The way the customers came from as far as 15 miles, which is a day's walk for a man not in an army, specifically for that flour. You talk about Bridgewater, the harbour and the Parrot and the ships that came in from Bristol and Wales and sometimes from further. The particular quality of light on the water in the evenings. Your mother and the amber she kept for reasons she never explained to you. Your father's hands, which were large and knew everything about wood, and could make a bow blank from a timber with nothing but an adze, and those hands, and the knowledge accumulated over 30 years. These are the things that appear in the evening hours, not dramatically, just appearing, the way things appear when the day's work is done and the body's quiet enough that the mind can move in directions that aren't the march. William, who is normally not a man for these conversations, says something that surprises you. "I grew up in Devon," he says, "Honiton." And then nothing more, as if that's the complete thing he wanted to say, and maybe it is, and maybe it's enough. You look at him, he's looking at the fire. "Do you think about going back?" you ask. "At the end of campaigns," he says. "Not during. During you think about what's in front of you. What's in front of us." He's quiet for a moment that you've learned to read as deliberate. "Philip's found his ground," he says. "I'd put money on it. The riders who came in this afternoon, the commander's tent was active for 2 hours after. That's not routine information. That's the kind of information that makes plans. How soon? 2 days, 3, however long it takes Edward to get the army where he wants it and Philip to follow. And then we see what the day gives us." He says this the same way he says most things about the future, without inflection, without investment in a particular outcome. He's seen enough outcomes to know that wanting one doesn't improve your chances of getting it. What improves your chances is being ready, and being ready starts with your feet in the morning. The fire reduces from its evening generosity to the maintained overnight glow. Men settle into their sleeping positions with the practiced efficiency of people who've been finding their sleeping positions in fields for 6 weeks. Jack Stewart on his back, hands folded. Peter the miller on his side, facing the fire. You, on your right side, the bad shoulder out of the ground. The camp does its nightly thing, the active sounds of evening reducing by degrees to the ambient sounds of a large group of bodies at rest. The sentries call their rounds at the edges of the village. The horse lines shift and settle. Somewhere in the distance, what might be an owl. You should sleep. You know you should sleep. In 4 or 5 hours it starts again, but you're awake in the particular way that comes sometimes at the end of hard days. The body tired, but the mind still running at march speed, still processing the day, still taking inventory. The inventory, right foot, good, right. Toenail will go eventually, nothing requiring attention. Left foot, the blister drained clean, the pad in place, the wrap solid. Tomorrow morning more grease, more careful crossing at the heel, manageable. Back, sore in the way it's always sore. Will be sore tomorrow. Will continue to be sore until England. Noted. You put the inventory down. You think instead about what the march produces in your understanding of feet, which is an understanding that you didn't have before and that you couldn't have gotten except this way. Your feet are ordinary feet. They were ordinary feet in Bridgewater, where the worst they faced was a market day's walking. They were ordinary feet for the first week of the campaign, when they revealed their ordinariness by blistering in 3 separate places and developing 2 hot spots and beginning to crack at the heels. They are now, after 6 weeks of attention and William's education and the daily ritual that has become as much a part of waking up as opening your eyes, a different proposition. Not extraordinary. Still ordinary feet, but managed. Cared for with the knowledge and the material and the time that ordinary feet need when they're asked to do extraordinary things. And the knowledge isn't extraordinary either. That's the thing that strikes you most in the evenings when you have time to think about it. The knowledge is very old and very simple. Put something soft and protective between the foot and the shoe. Keep it dry when possible, dry it when wet, replace it when worn. Grease the skin to prevent the friction. and cracking and moisture damage that will otherwise occur. Examine regularly and address early. Don't ignore problems until they become catastrophes. This is not complicated. It is not a discovery. It is a very old piece of practical wisdom that predates this campaign by so much time that calling it old is almost not enough. It predates the campaign by everything. You think about the Egyptian tomb rapper, whoever they were, working at 5 in the morning in the cool of the Nile Valley, applying whatever grease they had to the feet of the person whose burial they were preparing, winding the linen strips in the particular pattern that their tradition had worked out, pressing the cloth into place with hands that knew the shape of feet, because hands that worked with feet always know their shape. 3,000 years ago in a tomb in Egypt, a wrapped foot, the linen still in place, still wound correctly, the crossing at the heel still seated exactly as designed. 3,000 years and the foot had held, the knowledge had held. You are part of this line. Thomas Ashe of Bridgewater, Somerset, 17 years old, lying in a stolen yard in a borrowed village in a country he had no particular quarrel with, his feet wrapped in wool cloth that his father's father bought at market and set aside specifically for this purpose, greased with tallow and rosemary because William told him to, and William has been right about everything, part of a chain of knowledge about feet that goes back to before there were words to write it down. The stars come out. Normandy stars, August stars, doing what stars do, being there regardless, tracking their ancient paths across the sky in the vast rotation that doesn't care about campaigns or marches or the things armies do to each other and to the countryside they move through. You know some of them. The cluster that resolves into individual stars if you look long enough at it. The bright one that tracks west through the night. The warrior arrangement that your father showed you, though he called it something different from what William calls it, and both of them probably call it something different from what the man who first noticed the shape called it. Things get renamed. The knowledge inside them persists. Your left heel, inside its pad, inside its carefully crossed wrap, inside its shoe, is at rest. Your right toenail is loose and resting. Your back is going to be sore tomorrow. You're going to wake up before dawn and deal with all of this and then walk another 20 miles and deal with whatever comes of that. But that's tomorrow. Right now, you're just here, lying on the ground in a French village on a summer night in a year that hasn't decided yet what it's going to be remembered for, which means it still could be anything, which means tomorrow is still open. The fire is almost out, just the glow of the embers. Let it come. Let the day finish. You're warm enough, fed enough. Your feet are dealt with and resting. You have what you need to start tomorrow. The knowledge in your hands and the grease in the jar and the clean strips of wool cloth drying beside you in the night air that will be ready in the morning. Let the camp breathe. Let the stars continue their business. Let the fire become embers, and the embers become grey, and the grey become the dark before dawn. You're tired in the way that's honest. The day went in, and you're tired. That's not a complaint. That's just the record. Sleep, when it comes the way it comes when the body has genuinely earned it. Not gradually, but all at once, like stepping through a door. One moment you're looking at the stars. The next moment, you're not looking at anything. The last thing you hear is one of the sentries calling the watch in the dark of the village, a voice moving through the emptied streets, doing the thing that keeps the army safe while it sleeps, the voice going, "And all's well," which is not entirely true. There is a man in a cart somewhere nearby who did not deal with his foot soon enough, and there are French scouts in the darkness to the south reporting this army's position to a king who has found his ground, and in 4 days everything is going to be different. But right now, from where you are, lying in the yard with the stone warm from the evening under your back and the stars overhead, and the camp breathing in its collected rhythm, all's well. It will have to do, and it does. Centuries from now, the chalk road south of this village will still be here, under whatever the future puts on top of it. The farmhouse will have different walls and different purposes. The river you crossed today will run the same, more or less. The fields will have been planted and harvested and planted again until the layers of it are deeper than the buildings above them. But someone will still wake up in the morning and put something on their feet before they go anywhere. A sock. They'll call it a sock and they'll put it on without thinking, the way you put on a shoe now without thinking about what a shoe is or how long it took someone to figure out that shoes were the answer. They'll put it on, and the sock will do what the wool wrap does, and what the sphagnum moss does, and what the lanolin from the unwashed fleece does. It manages the interface between the foot and the world. It takes the friction. It manages the moisture. It makes the incompatible compatible. The sock is just the latest answer to a question that has been asked every morning since people have been people. It has been answered in linen and in wool, and in dried grass and in rawhide, and in papyrus stripped from the Nile bank, and in bark from the trees of the American Northwest, and in raw lamb's wool fresh from the shearing, and in sphagnum moss peeled from a Welsh bog, and in tallow and beeswax and bear grease and marmot fat and pine resin. It has been answered by Roman centurions and Norse fishermen, and Egyptian rappers and Welsh shepherds and Somerset archers in the middle of Normandy in the summer of 1346. The question is always the same. How do I get from here to there without my feet stopping me? The answer is always the same. Put something between the foot and the ground. The right something. Applied with attention. Maintained with care. Changed when it needs changing. Let your eyes close. Let the century's voice recede. Let tomorrow wait for tomorrow. You've done the work. The feet are at rest. Sleep. Good night. The night does not stay quiet forever. Sometime past the second watch. You do not know the hour, but the stars have shifted, and the plough has wheeled a quarter of its circle from where it sat above the barn when you lay down. A sound comes from the southern edge of the camp that is not the sound of sleeping men. It is a shout, then 2 shouts, then the flat percussive crack of what is unmistakably a crossbow being loosed in the dark. You're on your feet before you are awake. The body knows what to do before the mind does. Your hand finds your bow where you left it, propped against the stable wall. Your feet find the shoes before you look at them. You're cinching the lace with your fingers working independently, by feel, in the dark, while your eyes are already scanning the yard and your ears are already sorting the sounds. The crossbow was not close, it was 2 fields south. It was 1 bolt and then silence, which means either a sentry caught something and missed it, or a sentry caught something and did not miss it, and either way the something was there. William is already standing. He is dressed. You do not know when he dressed. He may not have undressed. He is watching the south end of the village with the particular stillness of a man who's been in this exact situation before and has learned that the first information is almost always wrong. "Stay," he says. "You stay." Jack Stewart is beside you now, also on his feet, also with his bow. Jack's hair is flattened on one side from the straw, and his eyes are not entirely focused yet, but his hand is steady. Jack's hand is always steady. You've noticed this about Jack. Something in him goes calm when other things are loud. French, Jack says. Maybe, William says. Maybe not. Wait. The camp is waking around you in the way armies wake, not gradually but in pulses, each tent and yard and barn suddenly throwing out men. The sound building from murmur to word to shout to something organised, and you can hear the centenars calling order into it. The file leaders pushing men into some arrangement that is more useful than a yard full of startled archers looking south. 3 minutes, maybe 4. A man comes back from the direction of the shout, moving at a trot, and he is grinning. He's not the expression of a man who has seen a disaster. Scout, the man says to no one in particular. One of theirs got too close. Wilson put a bolt in his horse, and the rider ran. Direction? William asks. Southeast. William looks southeast. He looks the way a man looks when he's reading something in the darkness, when the direction itself is information. He nods once, slowly, the nod of a calculation completed. The ground, he says after a moment. Crécy Ridge is southeast. They're measuring the distance. You don't understand this yet. You understand it later. But right now you put your bow down against the wall again and you feel your heartbeat in your feet. Not in your chest, where heartbeats are supposed to be, but in the soles, a pulse in the arch, which is where the blood goes when you've stood up hard from sleep. And you look down at your shoes in the dark and you think, they are still on. You put them on correctly, without light, without thinking about it, in the time it took the shouting to start. 3 weeks ago you could not have done that. 3 weeks ago you would have fumbled the lace. You would have pushed the wrong foot first. You would have come out of the barn wrong-footed and lost seconds that could matter. The wrapping is what made it possible. You know exactly where the cloth sits, exactly how it meets the shoe, exactly how much to cinch. The shoe is an extension of the foot now, and the foot is an extension of you, and the putting on is a reflex rather than a task. This is what William meant, you realise, not the foot care in isolation, the readiness. The shoe that goes on in the dark without thought frees your mind for the things that actually require it. You go back to the straw. You do not sleep quickly this time, but you sleep eventually, the body asserting its needs over the mind's continued interest in the southeastern dark. The next morning is different. You feel it before you know what the difference is. The air has the same grey pre-dawn quality, the same damp hovering over the fields, the same smell of horse and ash, and the bread someone in the cookhouse has had going since before the watch. The camp sounds are the same, the progressive waking, the small complaints, the first coughing of the morning. But something underneath it is different. Something in the frequency of the officers' voices, something in the pace at which men move. William is already doing his feet when you open your eyes. He's unwinding the left one with the focused attention he always gives it, the cloth coming off in long unspooling rotations, and he holds it up to the first thin light from the barn door and examines what he finds. We're moving faster today, he says, without looking at you. How do you know? Because the tent owner came through the yard before dawn and he didn't announce the breakfast bell. When they don't announce the bell, it means they're not giving it. We march without breakfast. We march with bread in hand. There's a difference. It means something changed in the night. You think about the scout, the southeast. The French found their ground, William says. He says it flatly, the way a man says something that is not news to him. They've been looking for 3 days. Now they've found it. They'll sit on it and wait for us to come to them, which means Edward can't go around, which means... He stops. He resumes unwinding. Which means we're going to Crécy, you say. We're going to Crécy. You sit with that for a moment. Then you begin to do your feet. This is the thing you understand now that you did not understand 3 weeks ago. The question of what you put inside your shoes is not separate from the question of what happens to you next. They are the same question. The army that can walk the last mile is the army that fights the last fight. The foot that fails in the morning cannot draw a bow in the afternoon. The archer who is nursing a corrupted heel in the line is not an archer. He is a man standing in an archer's place, slower and shorter and less than what is needed. William has explained this. He has explained it 3 or 4 times in 3 weeks, in different words, with different examples, and each time the lesson has added something to the one before. The first time, on the march from Saint-Vaast-le-Hougue, he told you about the Battle of the Golden Spurs, 1302, the Flemish commune defeating French knights at Courtrai. The Flemish were infantry. They won because they could stand and hold ground while the cavalry came apart on the drainage ditches. But they could only stand and hold because they were on home ground, in familiar fields, and they had walked the 6 miles to the battlefield on feet they knew. The French knights rode. The French knights lost. The horses' feet are managed, William said. Every lord's farrier shoes his destrier before a campaign. The lord checks the shoes before a battle. No lord would ride a horse to war on unshod hooves. But those same lords send their infantry to march 30 miles on feet that haven't been looked at since the muster. Why? Because knights don't have feet. They have boots. Expensive boots, good leather made to measure. A knight never walks far enough for his feet to matter, so he doesn't think about feet. And when he commands infantry, he commands them without thinking about their feet either, because he has never had a foot problem in his life. This was the first lesson. The second lesson came 4 days later, on the march south from Valognes, when a man in the tertio ahead of you was pulled from the line at midday. Not the man from the day before, a different man from a different company. He had a different problem, not a blister, but a heat seam, which is what happens when the shoe leather has been badly maintained and the stitching along the inner edge has worked loose, and the edge itself has folded inward and begun cutting the foot on every step. It is not dramatic. It is just a line of abraded skin, raw from 6 hours of contact, becoming a thin crescent wound, and then the wound beginning to weep, and then, in wet conditions in summer heat, in the kind of dampness that lives between cloth and leather, the weeping becoming something worse. William made you look at it. Don't look away, he said. This is the thing you're preventing. This is what you're paying attention to your foot for every morning, so that this doesn't happen to you. The man's name was Edric. He was from Essex. He was maybe 30, which was not young but was not old, and he walked with a particular forward lean that you later understood was the body compensating, shifting weight to the outer edge of the foot to avoid the inner crease where the damage was. He had been walking like that for 3 days. 3 days of the body compensating, the hips adjusting, the knee torquing inward, the back taking a load it was not designed to carry, so that the original small problem had become a catalogue of connected problems all the way up the spine. The surgeons dealt with the foot. That was manageable. What was harder to manage was the hip and the knee, which had been loaded wrong for 70 miles, and which would not simply return to normal when the foot was fixed. Edric fought at Crécy. You saw him in the line, but he was slower than he should have been, and he knew it, and you could see him knowing it, the knowledge sitting in his jaw. The feet are the foundation, William said. When the foundation is wrong, everything above it is wrong. Fix the foot before the foot needs fixing. This was the second lesson. The third lesson was the one about materials, which you've already received most of, but which has a final instalment this morning, as you sit in the Normandy farmyard before dawn and unwrap your feet and find them, mercifully again, acceptable. "Show me," William says. You hold up the cloth. He looks at it in the thin light. "Better," he says. "You're getting the tension right on the ankle." The ankle was always the problem. The ankle is always the problem. Everyone's ankle is the problem. The heel sits in the shoe and doesn't move much. The toes are enclosed and don't move much. But the ankle is the hinge, and if the cloth is loose at the hinge, the cloth shifts on every step, and by mile 10 the thing that was covering the point you needed covered has migrated 2 inches, and what's under it is bare. You look at the ankle wrap. The figure 8 crossing you've been practicing since the 3rd day. The tension that comes from passing the cloth under the arch before bringing it up, not straight across, which would slip, but at an angle which catches. Who taught you that, you ask? The figure 8. William considers. A woman in Gascony, he says. Bayonne. She bandaged a sprain and I watched her hands and asked her after. She said her mother taught her. Her mother was a herbalist, a healer. She said the crossing at the ankle has been the same since before her grandmother's time. And before that? She shrugged. Before that was before that. You take your tallow from the small tin you carry. The tin itself is a prize traded for a piece of saltfish outside Caen, a woman who had no use for tallow and immediate need of fish. And you press it into the heel pad. The tallow has a smell this morning, rich and specific. The smell of rendered fat that has been sitting in a closed tin through a summer night. And you breathe it in and do not find it unpleasant. This is a change. 3 weeks ago, the smell of tallow made you gag. You'd grown up with it. Every household has tallow. Every candle is tallow. Every piece of a leather is tallow dressed. But it was background smell, invisible the way all familiar smells are invisible. The smell of the foot tin is different. It is concentrated. It is intimate. It is the smell of maintenance rather than illumination, a closer and more deliberate thing, and it took 2 weeks before you stopped noticing it, and another week before you stopped minding it. Now it smells like readiness. "There's a man in the 6th company," Jack says from behind you. He's on his back, addressing the rafters, finishing his own rap. Corbin says he doesn't rap. "How are his feet?" William asks. "Fine," he says. He says. William is quiet. A man who doesn't rap and says his feet are fine is a man whose feet haven't failed him yet, William says. He'll say his feet are fine right up until the morning they aren't, and then he won't understand why, because he's never been paying attention to the gradual. He's only noticed the not bad. He hasn't noticed what not bad looks like. What does not bad look like? Pink, supple, no broken skin. No redness at any point of contact, nails even, not split. Toes with room to spread, heel not cracked, arch not swollen. He pauses. Your feet should feel like they could walk another 20 miles when you put the shoe on, not like they can manage the first 5. The margin is what keeps you. The bread comes around before the bell sounds. William was right. No bell. A boy moves through the yard with the basket, and each man takes a round, and that is breakfast. Eaten standing, eaten moving, eaten while the camp breaks itself around you, with the efficient urgency of an army that knows something changed in the night. You eat and wrap and eat. You finish the left foot and start the right. Your hands know the sequence. You could do it without watching. You've done it without watching. In the dark last night, the scout's crossbow still ringing. And the knowledge is in your fingers the way any learned physical thing lives in the body, below the level of intention, accessible without effort. The march on the third day is different from the march on the first and second days. On the first day, the day you watched the man pulled from the column, the day of the river and the moss, everything was revelation. New information arriving in every mile, William's voice beside you naming things, explaining things, connecting this morning's blister to a campaign fought before you were born, connecting the Welsh archer's bog plant to the drainage customs of a monastery you will never see. You walked 24 miles and at the end of it you were emptied in a particular way, the way you are emptied when you have been given too much to think about at once, and you slept immediately and dreamlessly. On the second day, the information settled. Things you had heard became things you knew. The foot wrap became a routine rather than an instruction. The hourly check became reflex rather than reminder. The tallow went on the heel pad without thought. The moss went in the boot toe without debate. The lace tension calibration happened in 10 seconds instead of 3 minutes. You had the beginning of competence, which is different from early competence. It does not feel like progress yet. It just feels like the mistakes becoming fewer. Today, the third day, you are somewhere past early competence and approaching the thing William has and that you do not have a name for yet. The thing where the knowledge becomes so natural that it disappears, and what remains is just a man walking in a direction with his feet in good condition, no drama in it at all. The road south runs along the edge of a forest. The Forêt de Crécy, you learn later, a name that will carry weight, and the morning light comes through the trees in long flat bands, yellow-white, the light of high summer at low angle, lying on the road in sections where the canopy opens and withdrawing again where it thickens. The sound of the column, 8,000 men, 4,000 horses, the supply carts, the equipment wagons, the livestock that follows armies, has a particular acoustic in the forest edge. The sound reflecting off the tree line and coming back slightly delayed, so that the column seems larger than it is, the echo adding bodies. Peter the miller is here today. He has been marching somewhere ahead of you for 3 days, and this morning the flow of the column has deposited him at your shoulder, and he is perspiring already. Peter perspires in the cold, you've noticed, so heat adds to an existing condition rather than creating it, and he is in a mood that is not quite complaint, but contains the possibility of complaint, held in check by the bread he is still eating, and the fact that the morning is not yet bad enough to earn a serious grievance. 3 days, Peter says. 3 days of this road. It's a different road each day, Jack says pleasantly. It's the same road. It's France. All of France is the same road. That's not entirely accurate, you say. It's accurate enough for marching, Peter says. Point at the horizon, put one foot in front of the other. That's France. How are your feet? William asks. Peter glances at him. Peter does not know William well. Peter knows William the way you knew William before 3 weeks ago, as the older man, the veteran, the one who says things in a low voice that other men take for granted. Peter does not know yet that this question is not small talk. My feet, Peter says. My feet are feet. They're down there. They're not giving you any trouble. They're giving me the trouble of walking 20 miles a day, which is the trouble feet give on a march and isn't something you can address. Otherwise they're... He stops. He looks down. He does the particular assessment you have seen men do when they have been asked to pay attention to something they've been ignoring. A rapid, retrospective inventory, going back through the day's miles, looking for something that was there all along. Actually, he says more slowly, my left heel is a bit something. When did it start? Yesterday? Maybe. I don't know. The day before. Show me tonight, William says, before you sleep. Peter absorbs this. Peter is not a man who shows his feet to strangers. You can see him working through this fact. But something in William's tone, not commanding, not urgent, just matter-of-fact in the way only real knowledge is matter-of-fact, moves through Peter's resistance. Right, Peter says, all right. And then they are talking about something else, and you are walking, and the forest edge moves past on the right, and the road goes south. The thing about a long march that no one tells you before your first one, and that everyone who has done several takes for granted, is the way the hours dissolve. The first 2 hours are the most present. You're in the morning, the air still cool enough to be pleasant, the body fresh enough to feel the ground beneath it accurately, to register each stone and each soft patch and each place where the road cambers and pulls the ankle outward. In the first 2 hours you can have a conversation. You can think about 2 things at once. You can look at the country you're moving through and actually see it. By hour 3, the conversation has become simpler. The country has become less visible. You are still moving through it, your eyes still receiving it, but the mind has stopped engaging with what the eyes send, because the mind has turned inward toward the management of the body, which is now, subtly, not dramatically, less comfortable than it was. By hour 4, you have settled into the march's rhythm in the way that is both easier and harder than the first hours. Easier because the pace is automatic, the body doing what it does without requiring instruction. Harder because the automatic pace has a weight to it, a momentum, and interrupting it, stopping for water, stopping to check the road ahead, requires more effort than continuing. By hour 5, the feet. This is the hour that William has discussed. Hour 5 is the hour when the soft tissue of the foot has been compressed and expanded and compressed again, enough times that it begins to tell you things about itself. Not pain, not yet. Pain comes later or not at all, depending on the morning's work. But information, awareness, a heat at a specific point that means here, this point. Pay attention here, you pay attention. The right heel, slightly, not the sensitive spot, not where you applied the extra tallow, but slightly to the outside of it, where the shoe's counter meets the padding at an angle you haven't noticed before. It is not bad, it is information. You adjust your stride fractionally, not consciously. You could not explain what you change, only that something in the way the foot meets the ground shifts half a degree, and the information changes, becomes less, and then is gone. This is what William means by listening. The body tells you before the body breaks, he said, somewhere around hour 3 of the first day. Before the blister, there's the heat. Before the heat, there's the friction. Before the friction, there's the misalignment. If you're listening at the misalignment stage, you never see the blister. If you only start listening at the blister stage, you've already missed 3 opportunities. What do you do when you feel the misalignment? You adjust stride, angle, weight distribution. You change whatever you can change without stopping. If you can't change enough without stopping, you stop. 1 minute, check, correct, continue. That 1 minute costs you less than the 3 days you'd lose if you ignored it until it became a blister, and the blister became an abscess. And if it becomes an abscess, William had looked at you, then you're in a cart. Grufford is waiting for you at the stream crossing. Not literally waiting. He arrived at the crossing the same way you did, by walking, and the crossing is slow because the ford is narrow and the column is backed up. But he is there when you arrive, and he is sitting on a rock at the stream's edge with his boots off, and he is doing something to his feet that involves a plant material you do not immediately recognize. It is not sphagnum moss this time. It is something flatter, broader leafed, a large plant that grows in a spreading rosette close to the ground, with pale leaves that have a particular texture, slightly waxy, slightly ribbed, able to hold its shape when compressed. "What is that?" you ask. Grufford holds one up. "Lyciara bugale," he says. Then, seeing your expression, "shepherd's purse. It has another name. Ribwort plantain, the English say. It grows everywhere. Roadsides, paths, any disturbed ground. It follows people." "Follows people?" "Wherever people walk, it grows. The seeds stick to feet and shoes and animals and come along." He turns the leaf in his hand. "The Algonquin call it Englishman's foot. It arrived with your ships." A faint smile, difficult to read. "It goes where you go, and you put it in your shoe. Under the heel, under the ball. It's not the same as the moss. The moss does one thing, this does another. The moss takes the moisture. This takes the impact. The ribbing in the leaf, see it?" He holds it to the light. Compresses on the downstroke. Rebounds. Not much, but enough. You take the leaf he offers. It is cool from the stream's proximity. The ribs are visible as parallel channels running the length of the leaf, and when you press your thumb against it, you feel what he means. A slight give, a slight return. Nothing that would stand out as cushioning on its own, but, over 1,000 steps, something that accumulates. "Where did you learn this?" "My grandmother. She was a healer in Gwynedd. She used plantain for wounds too. The leaves drawn across a cut to stop the bleeding. She used it for insect stings. She used it for mouth sores. It has many uses. The shoe use was one she kept from her grandmother, who kept it from someone before." He places the leaves carefully, 2 of them under his heel and the ball of his foot. "I've never found it written down. It's a past thing." "Past, you say? Carried, mouth to ear. One woman to the next woman, in a line that goes back to whatever morning someone noticed it helped." The column begins to move again. Gruffudd laces his boots. You cross the stream, the water cold on your ankles, bracing, the bottom smooth and pebbly, and resume the march, and the plantain leaves are in Grufford's boots now, invisible, doing their small work with every step. You think about the line he described. Mouth to ear, one woman to the next. The grandmother's grandmother's grandmother, in a chain of past knowledge that runs backward into a time before writing, before monasteries, before Roman roads, before any of the organized systems of knowing that William has described to you. Just women noticing what worked and telling the next woman, and the knowledge surviving in that telling the way it could not survive in any other way. Not in books, not in laws, not in the arrangements of kings, but in the domestic detail of how to help a person get from here to there without their feet stopping them. The road bends south. The forest closes in on both sides. Somewhere ahead through the trees you can see the light opening, a clearing, or a road junction, or the edge of the forest where the Crécy plain begins. You have been told about the plain. You have not been told much. Soldiers are told what they need and no more, but you know it is flat and open, which is good for archers and bad for cavalry, and that the ridge runs northeast-southwest and provides a defensive position for whoever arrives there first and gets to choose it. The French cavalry is 2 days away, you have heard, maybe less. The halt at midday comes beside a stone well in a village that has been abandoned, its inhabitants having heard 3 days ago what a passing army does and chosen to be elsewhere for the duration. The well still functions. The bucket rope is still attached. The men queue in their natural grouping, company by company, file by file, and drink in rotation, and the organised quiet of the halt is the closest thing to rest you will get until the camp. William examines Peter's heel. Peter sits on the edge of the well surround with his left boot off and his foot propped on the opposite knee, and he looks both patient and embarrassed, the way a man looks when he is participating in a procedure he doesn't entirely understand but has decided to trust. William has his thumb pressed to the heel, working in small circles, reading it. "Here," William says. Peter nods. "That's the one." "How long have you been walking on this?" "I told you. Maybe 2 days, maybe 3. 3 days, William says. It is not a question, not quite a reprimand, just a clarification, the slight emphasis carrying the weight of what he doesn't say next. "Is it bad?" you ask. "It's early," William says. "Early is fine. Early is the time to fix it." He reaches into his pack and produces a small knife, folded, and a strip of clean linen that he keeps separate from everything else, wrapped around a piece of wax. "Peter." "Don't cut it," Peter says immediately. "It's not ready to cut. If I drain it now, there's nothing to drain, and a cut on a blister that's not ready is worse than the blister. I'm going to protect it." He takes the linen and folds it twice, then again into a small firm pad, and he applies beeswax to one face of it. Not tallow, beeswax, which is stiffer and more adherent, and he positions this against the heel, just off-centre of the problem point, so that the pad sits between the pressure source and the developing blister, bearing the load that would otherwise bear on the injury. "Walk on the outside of the heel," William says, "just slightly. You'll know you're doing it right when this stops talking to you. The pad will stay. It'll stay until this evening if you don't think about it. Don't think about it. If you think about it, you'll adjust and it'll shift." He tapes it. Not tape, not really, but a strip of linen tied with a particular knot that comes around the heel and anchors at the instep, tight but not constricting. "And show me tonight." Peter puts his boot back on. He stands. He takes 3 careful steps, testing. The gait slightly modified the way William prescribed. Weight rolled just to the outside of the injured heel. Not much, just enough. And you can see the relief on his face. The specific relief of a thing that was talking suddenly quieted. Peter says. "Yes," William says. "How did you know that would—" "Because it's a compression injury on a specific point, and the solution to a compression injury on a specific point is to redistribute the load. The pad isn't healing anything. It's changing where the force goes. The heel heals itself. You just need to stop interrupting it." Peter looks at his foot for a moment longer. Then he looks at William. Then he puts his boot on and laces it and joins the column. The afternoon march is the long march. 20 miles in the morning, 15 in the afternoon. This is not official. No centenar has announced it. But you have learned to read the day's distance in the light and the quality of the terrain and the specific tiredness of the men around you. And you know when the afternoon halt comes that it comes late and far. The forest opens. The Crécy plain is what it was described to be, wide and tilted, the ground running uphill to the east and northeast, the village in the distance at the top of the ridge, the windmill visible from 3 miles out, the long slope of the upper terrace where you'll find, tomorrow morning, your place in the line. But that is tomorrow. Today there is still the walking. Hour 7. The column is quiet now, in a different way than it was quiet in the morning. Morning quiet is anticipatory. Afternoon quiet is attritive. The silence of men who have used their conversation and are now walking in the elementary way with nothing left over for comment. The feet come down, the feet come up, the road goes under, you check your right heel again. Still fine. Still the nothing that is the best answer to a question about pain. You think about this, the nothing, the maintenance of nothing, and you think that there is something almost philosophical in it, the way the entire practice of foot care is the preservation of absence, the daily work of keeping a bad thing from existing. You cannot point to the blister you don't have and show it to anyone. You cannot demonstrate the infected heel you prevented by greasing it on the third morning. The absence is the achievement, and achievements of absence are invisible, and therefore often uncredited. And this may be why so much of what William knows went untransmitted in the official record. You cannot put an absence in a chronicle. The chronicle records what happened. It does not record the vast adjacent space of what didn't happen, which is where most of the human work of survival actually occurs. William has not said this directly, but you think he knows it. You think this is why he teaches the way he does, not from a book, not from official instruction, but one man to the next man, the same way Grufford's grandmother's grandmother taught the plantain leaf. The knowledge that matters is the knowledge of how to maintain nothing, and it lives in the passing. Hour 8. Rob the Fletcher materializes at your shoulder. You have not seen him since day 1. He has been further up the column with his own file, and he looks the same. The 2 missing fingers on the left hand already a thing you simply perceive rather than notice. The hand as it is rather than an absence of something it was. Feet, he says. Fine, you say. He nods. The nod of a man who has asked and received the only acceptable answer and can now proceed. William says you're learning, Rob says. William says that? He says you're listening. That's what he said. The Ash boy's listening. Rob considers. From William, that's not nothing. You walk for a while in silence. How are your feet, you ask? Rob holds up the 2-fingered hand. My hands are the problem, not your hands. Your feet. He looks down, the brief considering look of a man checking in on a part of himself he generally ignores. Fine, he says. The right heel is always a concern on long marches. I keep it greased. William? 20 years ago. First time I marched with him. He saw my right heel in camp and he said, "That's going to be a problem in 10 days." And I said, "It's fine." And he said, "It's fine now." And in 10 days it was not fine, and he fixed it and told me what to do, and I've done it since. What did you do before? Rob thinks about this. What everyone does. Nothing. Hoped it would be all right. Usually it was, sometimes it wasn't. He pauses. The times it wasn't were bad times. How bad? Crécy's going to be a battle, yes. 3-4 hours, then it's done, one way or another. But in 1337 in Flanders, we spent 9 days approaching a defensive line that the French kept retreating away from, and those 9 days were all march. No engagement, just march. And there was a man in our company who lost 3 weeks to his feet, not in battle, not to any weapon, just to the march. 3 weeks in a cart while the campaign moved around him. Rob shakes his head. He never said what William told him. He just accepted the cart. But I saw his face when he got in it. What did his face say? It said, "I knew this was coming and I didn't do anything about it." The camp at Crécy is different from the camp of the last 3 nights. You know it immediately when you arrive, before the tents are up. before the fires are lit, before the company arrangements have been made and the sentries posted, something about the way the officers stand, something about the direction they face, uniformly northeast, toward the ridge, toward the windmill, and the specific quality of the silence in which they face it. The army has found the ground it wanted, or the army has arrived at the ground where what comes next will happen. Whether this is the ground it wanted is a question for later, for historians, for men with the luxury of knowing how it turned out. But the army has arrived, and tomorrow the other army will arrive, and the day after tomorrow, or the day after that, or whenever the stars and the lords arrange it, the thing this march has been approaching will occur, and you will either be standing in the line or you won't be, and if you are in the line your feet will carry you there or they won't. William sets up the camp. He knows how to do this with the efficiency of a man who has set up many camps, who has a system for everything, and therefore does not have to make decisions about anything. The bedding goes here, the pack goes here, the fire, there will be fires tonight, there will be fires whenever the army knows it is stopped, goes there, downwind of the bedding. You follow his system. Jack and Peter join you. Gruffudd comes later from a different direction, the Welsh companies having been assigned a different section of the camp, and he sits beside the fire and says nothing for a while, watching the flames find themselves. "Tomorrow," Jack says. No one responds. The word has enough weight without a question mark on it. The bread comes around again, and this time there is something to go with it. A quarter of salt fish per man, and a cup of something hot and thin that might once have been related to an onion. You eat it. You eat it all, including the parts that are less pleasant than the other parts, because you have learned in 3 weeks that the choice is not between good food and bad food, but between food and the hour when you wish you had eaten the food you passed on. Peter holds out his boot. William unlaces it, removes the pad, inspects the heel. "Better," he says. "Already." "It stopped talking," Peter says. "It stopped talking because you redistributed the load. It'll be fully quiet by morning if you replace the pad tonight and sleep right." "And the battle?" William looks at him. "And the battle," he says, "you'll fight on feet that are in good condition, which is all anyone can ask." He replaces the pad with fresh linen, the wax on the new side, the same knot. Peter laces the boot. The fire breathes. Somewhere in the camp a man is singing, not loudly, the kind of singing that is more humming than melody, the sound a man makes when he is not thinking about the singing but doing it anyway. You do your feet one more time before sleep. Not the full morning ritual. There is no reason for the full ritual in the evening. No day's march to prepare for, the feet having already done what they were going to do today, but a check, an inspection. The same 3 questions. What has changed? What needs attention? What do I do about it? Right foot, no change. The heel is unchanged. The ball shows a slight redness from the afternoon stone road, nothing more. The toes have space. The nails are even. Left foot. The small toe on the left foot has a developing friction area on its outer edge, where it meets the shoe. It has been coming for 2 days. It is not yet a blister. It is a place where a blister is considering its options. You apply tallow to the area with more deliberateness than the rest of the foot, more volume, building up a layer that will, overnight, soften the skin and change the friction coefficient at the point of contact. You tell William. He looks. He approves. He says, "Check it again in the morning. If the redness is gone, continue. If it's increased, add a pad." "Right. And the lace on the left shoe, see how it's wearing at the 3rd eyelet. Reinforce it before you sleep. A broken lace at hour 5 of tomorrow is a delay you don't want. You had not noticed the lace. You look at it now. It is wearing, barely. The beginning of a fibrous fraying where the leather has stressed against the metal of the eyelet through 10,000 repetitions of lacing and delacing. William is right. It will not last much longer. Another day, maybe 2, but maybe it will last until it doesn't, and the time it chooses to go will not be a convenient time. You reinforce it with a short wrap of linen thread, twice around, a simple whipping that catches the fibres together and gives the weak point something to lean on. It takes 3 minutes. That's all it takes, William says, watching you do it. 3 minutes before sleep and you've added 2 days to the lace. And if I hadn't noticed? Then I'd have noticed eventually, or you'd have noticed when it broke. He pauses. Most men notice when it breaks. The last hour before sleep, the camp settles differently than it has settled on previous nights. Quieter, more deliberate. Men who have been talking quietly throughout the evening simply stop, not because they have run out of things to say, but because the things there are to say are either too large or too private to say tonight, in this camp, on this ridge, in this country, with the morning containing what it contains. Jack lies on his back. Jack's eyes are open, looking at the stars, but not in the way of a man looking at stars, in the way of a man looking through them. The past on one side, the future on the other, and the thin membrane of the present. Tonight, the fire, the camp, the snoring of a dozen soldiers distributed in the darkness. The only thing between. Jack, you say. Are you frightened? He thinks about this for longer than you expected. Not of the battle, he says. I was frightened of the battle before I'd seen a battle. Now I know what it's like. It's very loud and very fast, and what you've trained to do comes out of you without you telling it to. The fingers just do it. The body just does it. He pauses. What frightens me is the afterwards, the not knowing what it looks like. Nobody knows. No, nobody knows. He's quiet. I'd just like to know that it comes out right. You do not answer this because there is no answer to give. The fires burn down to coal glow. The camp breathes. The windmill on the ridge stands dark against the stars, one sail slightly torn, turning slowly in the night wind coming off the plain. William is already asleep. His breathing is the breathing of a man who has slept in 200 camps and knows that the body must be used as an instrument of rest, the same way it must be used as an instrument of work, deliberately, without drama, with attention to the conditions. He chose his position on the ground with care, not on the slope which pulls the body downhill all night, not on the stone which chills, not where the wind runs through the gap in the fence line. He is warm and level, and the slight irregularity of the ground beneath his back is something his body has accommodated over decades until it barely registers. He is at rest in the full sense of the word, not just stopped, at rest. You settle toward that. The feet are wrapped in clean cloth, loose for sleeping. Not the march wrap, not the firm figure 8, but the looser evening wrap that allows the skin to breathe and the tissue to recover its shape after a day of compression. The wool is clean, the tallow is applied. The small toe is protected, the lace is reinforced. The morning will come and you will do it again. The morning will come and the camp will wake with a different quality to it. You can already feel this, even now, even before it happens, and the officers will come through with the orders, and the army will arrange itself on this ridge in the positions it has been calculating since the scouts came back 3 days ago, and the Welsh archers will be on the flanks, which is where they are always put because of what they can do from a flank, and the English archers will be in their own formation, and the men-at-arms will be in theirs, and the whole arrangement will be waiting for what comes from the south, and the French army will come from the south, and what happens next is what happens, but your feet will be ready. You cannot control the French army. You cannot control the weather where there is weather coming. You can feel it in the air, a heaviness that says rain, and rain before a battle is its own set of problems, the bowstrings and the arrow fletching and the ground, underfoot all changing character in wet. You cannot control what your lord decides, or what the king decides, or what Philip of France decides on his side of the ridge. You can control your feet. You can control the wrap, and the tallow, and the linen, and the small toe protected, and the lace reinforced, and the morning ritual performed without omission. You can make sure that the part of the battle that depends on you arriving at the right place in the right condition is the part that goes right. William has said this in different ways on different days. Today he said it plainly. The archer who walks well shoots well. The archer who limps is shooting from a bad platform and doesn't know it. Every time the right foot presses into the ground on the draw, the ground pushes back. If the right foot is in pain, the pushback is inconsistent. The arrow goes where the pushback sends it, which is not always where you meant. The body is all one thing. The feet are the foundation. The foundation determines what is possible above it. Let your eyes close. The Crécy plain is dark and wide, and the night wind is moving across it from the southwest, the warm wet wind that carries the smell of the channel and the coming rain. And somewhere to the south there is another army also making camp, also eating and drinking and tending its injuries and sleeping the sleep of men who will wake into something large and irreversible. They have their feet too. You wonder if anyone thought to tend them. Sleep. The morning of the battle you wake before the call. You lie still for a moment, eyes open, listening. The camp is in the last stage of pre-dawn quiet, the stage where the darkness is still complete, but the quality of the silence has changed, taken on a certain held quality, the silence of something about to break. And then you sit up, and then you do your feet. The ritual is the same. It is exactly the same. The unwinding, the assessment, the three questions. Right foot. The heel unchanged, the redness from yesterday's stone road faded. The tallow has done its work overnight. The toes with space, the skills even. Left foot. The small toes' redness reduced. Not gone, but quieter. The tallow's layer has changed the skin's condition, softened what was becoming rigid. You apply the morning tallow, you wind the cloth. You check the figure eight crossing at the ankle, adjust the tension half a turn, find the place where the cloth is firm without constricting. You lace the shoe. You pull the lace through the reinforced third eyelet. The whipping holds, the linen thread doing what it was put there to do, and you tie it and you press your heel to the ground, and you feel the shoe hold your foot the way it is supposed to hold it. Not tight, not loose, present. William is watching you. Good, he says. That is all. One word. The same word he used on the first morning 3 weeks ago when you did it wrong and he corrected you and you did it again and it was fractionally less wrong. The same word he uses for adequate and for genuinely right, without differentiation of degree. But this morning you know the difference without him telling you. This morning the word means what it says. You stand. The army's beginning to wake around you. Jack is beside you. Peter, his heel padded, his lace double-tied with the extra knot William showed him yesterday. Rob the Fletcher is already stringing his bow. The practice of a man who checks his equipment the way other men drink water. First thing, always. Grufford comes from the Welsh section, his boots carrying, invisibly, inside, the plantain leaves and the bit of moss from the stream. He nods. The sun is not yet up. The ridge is grey and long ahead of you, the windmill dark against the brightening sky, the village of Crécy half visible to the north, the open slope of the plain running down to the south where the road from Aberville comes up through the forest. The battle will come from that direction. When it comes, you will be here, on this ridge, with your feet in good condition, your bow strung, your quiver full, the calluses on your fingers and the strength in your shoulders the product of years and the foundation beneath them the product of 3 weeks. You will be here, ready. The feet carried you here. They will carry you through what comes next. What comes next is a story for another night. Tonight, this night, the one that stretches toward you now, long and dark and slower than the march. Tonight is the night for letting the body finish its accounting. 23 miles, 4 days, 3 rivers, 1 forest, 1 abandoned village, 1 man pulled from the column, 1 blister prevented, 1 lace reinforced, 1 small toe padded against the morning. These are the facts of the feat. The larger facts are the larger facts, and they will exist tomorrow and for a long time after tomorrow, carried in chronicles and songs and the memories of whoever survives to carry them. The battle, the numbers, the outcome. Those facts belong to the historians. These facts are yours. You earned them mile by mile, morning by morning, tallow in the heel, and cloth wound right, and the figure 8 crossing at the ankle. Let the weight go out of your legs. The march is done. Let the weight go out of your shoulders. The bow is set down for the night. Let your jaw unclench because you have been holding it since the 2nd hour of this afternoon's march, and you may not have noticed the body carrying its tensions in the places it knows best to hide them. Let your feet go soft in the wrap. The cloth is there, the work is done. The skin beneath the cloth is unmarked and rested and ready for whatever morning asks of it. In 7 or 8 hours you will unwrap them and look at them again, and they will tell you the same thing they have told you every morning for the last 3 weeks. Fine. Still fine. Ready. The human foot is a remarkable thing. 26 bones, 33 joints, 107 ligaments, 19 muscles, some intrinsic and some reaching from the leg, all of them coordinating in the fraction of a second it takes to set the heel down, roll through the arch, push off through the ball, lift, and do it again and again, 110 times per minute on the march, 1,000 feet per mile, 100,000 feet per day, each one managed by a system so automatic that you can walk 20 miles and think about entirely other things, unless the foot is in pain. Pain interrupts everything. Pain turns the background into the foreground and makes the march into a negotiation, and the negotiation into an attrition, and the attrition into the cart, and the cart is the end of the story you wanted to be in. The tallow prevents this. The cloth prevents this. The morning check prevents this. Such a small set of things, against such a large set of consequences. A bit of rendered fat. A strip of unwashed wool. 10 minutes each morning before the march begins. William knew this. The medicus at Hadrian's Wall knew this. The Norse fisherman's wife who knitted the first stocking knew something like this. The woman in Gwynedd who passed the plantain leaf to her granddaughter knew something like this. And before all of them, before the Norman ridge and the Roman wall and the Norse coast and the Welsh bog, There was a morning in a world without any of these names, in a place that has no name left for us to use, when a person wrapped something soft around their foot before they stood up because they had learned, by the painful method of not doing it, that the something soft made the going possible. That person did not write it down. They couldn't. But they told someone, and that someone told someone. And the telling went on, and here it is, 3 weeks of it, in a farmyard in Normandy in 1346, finding its way into your hands. Close your eyes now. The camp is breathing. The sentries are at their posts. The stars are wheeling their slow circle above the ridge. Tomorrow the army will do what armies do, and the feet will be there for it. Present, capable, maintained. But that is tomorrow. This is now. And now is a darkness that receives you. Let it. The feet are at rest. The cloth is wound. The morning will come with its questions. For now, nothing is required of you. For now, the ground holds you. For now, sleep moves through the camp like a tide, covering one man and then the next and then the next. The fires burning low. The horses still at their lines. The Crécy plain wide and dark and unharvested ahead of you. And you are part of the tide. You're already going. Already somewhere that is not the ridge, not the camp, not the war. Somewhere the feet do not need to go anywhere. Somewhere the cloth unwinds itself. Somewhere the weight is carried by nothing at all, because there is nothing to carry. Sleep, sleep, good night. There is a thing that happens between waking and sleeping, in the country just before dreams, where the mind releases its grip on the facts it has been managing all day, and the facts themselves shift character, become less like objects and more like weather, moving through you rather than sitting in you. The heel pad on Peter's boot, the plantain leaf in Gruffudd's shoe, the reinforced lace on your left shoe, the whipped thread holding what would otherwise have let go. Rob's two-fingered hand stringing the bow without hesitation, the muscle memory having compensated so completely for the absent fingers that the bow comes up clean every time. The draw beginning before the thought to draw has quite finished forming, William asleep, William's breathing. The way a man breathes when he has learned how to rest completely, when resting is something he does the same way he does the rap. Deliberately, with attention, with the recognition that the body is a resource that must be maintained and not merely used. These things come through you now, not in sequence, not with the logic the day imposed on them, just passing through, gentle as the wind off the plain, and going on, and underneath them, the feet. The feet are the last thing to let go of the day. This is true of most people, though most people have never noticed it. The legs, the back, the shoulders, these relax in stages, the muscles releasing in the order they were loaded, unwinding the day from the top down. But the feet hold on a little longer. They are the last to soften. They carry the day's road in them past the moment when the rest of the body has surrendered it. You can feel this now, the arch, gently, holding the memory of the day's miles, the heel, gentle, holding the memory of the chalk road, the small toe protected, holding the quiet fact of having been tended, and then, slowly they let go too. The arch softens, the heel releases, the small toe in its wrapping unclenches the small private vigilance it has maintained all day, the constant micro-attention of a part of you that has been managing something, keeping track, making sure it can stop now. Everything can stop now. You have done the work. The feet are clean and wrapped and greased and attended to, and the morning will find them the way you left them, ready. Everything else, the battle, the French cavalry, the weather coming in from the south, the outcome of the thing that Edward has been planning since he loaded his army onto ships. All of that exists outside the perimeter of what you can control, and outside that perimeter there is nothing more to do but be rested and present and in good condition when the morning arrives. Be rested, be present, be in good condition. These are not small things. They are, in fact, the whole thing. The whole human project reduced to its essentials, the management of the self in time, the maintenance of the instrument through which you participate in the world. The rest is larger than you. The feet are yours. They will carry you wherever you need to go. They'll carry you there if you let them rest. So rest. The cloth wound, the tallow applied, the lace reinforced. All's well, all's well. Good night. The rain comes before dawn, not a storm. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that wakes the camp with thunder or drives men from their sleeping positions into the shelter of walls and overhangs. Just rain. The patient, steady, continental, summer rain that begins quietly and continues. The kind of rain that is simply there when you become aware of it, that has been there longer than you knew. You feel it on your face before you open your eyes. Cool. Very fine. More mist than rain, but consistent, laying a thin moisture across the yard, and the sleeping men and the stone of the wells surround, and the planks of the cart wheels and the tent canvas, and the backs of the horses at the tether lines. The feet, of course, are dry. The wrap holds, the shoe holds, the small tent of cloth over the sleeping position, rigged by William from a piece of oilskin he has carried in his pack for 3 campaigns. Because rain before a battle is not an unusual thing. Because a wet archer is a degraded archer. Because the bowstring absorbs moisture, and the wood absorbs moisture, and the arrowhead corrodes if the damp gets under the wrapping on the shaft. The oilskin kept the worst of the mist off. But the ground will be wet. The slope will be wet. And wet ground is a different negotiation for the feet than dry ground. Wet ground gives. Wet ground shifts. Wet ground, especially the soft loam of a Normandy hillside in August, worked up by the passage of thousands of men, becomes something that takes the foot differently than hard chalk, that allows the heel to sink and the toe to grip and the ankle to work harder to maintain the stable platform from which the archer draws. William is awake. He is awake, and he's looking at the sky with the particular expression of a man recalculating. Rain, you say. Light, he says. It'll clear before midday, but the morning will be soft. Soft ground. Soft ground. He looks at your shoes. Tie the laces 1 extra eyelet up. The ankle needs more support when the ground gives under you. You want the shoe to be the stable thing when the earth isn't. You do this. The extra lace turn creates a different pressure at the ankle. Not uncomfortable, but definite. A presence that says, I am here, I am holding. You stand and press your heel into the wet chalk of the yard and you feel the difference. The shoe holds the foot more firmly, the ankle less inclined to roll, the small muscles of the foot less responsible for compensating for what the ground does not provide. Good, William says. He's adjusting his own. Jack comes awake and takes in the rain and the sky, and William's expression, and immediately checks his boots without being told. This is how you know Jack Stewart has been watching, has been paying attention even when he appeared not to. The reflex is there. The boot goes up, the heel is checked, the lace is tightened. You nod at each other. Peter arrives from the direction of the latrine pits, which have been dug in the accepted military position, downhill, downwind, 100 feet from the nearest tent. And he is walking with the slight outer heel lean that William prescribed for the developing blister, and it looks natural already. the body having incorporated the correction so quickly that he probably isn't conscious of it anymore. Wet, Peter says, in the tone of a man making an observation about weather that cannot be changed and therefore requires no further elaboration. Wet, you agree. How's your heel? William asks him. Peter considers. He does the internal survey. You can see him doing it. The slight stillness of a man going inward to check something. Then, quieter. It should be quiet by tonight, a day of the new weight distribution, and the inflammation will come down. He pauses. Don't stop the outer heel lean just because it starts to feel normal. Feel normal is what it should feel like. Peter nods. The bread comes round. The files begin to form. Somewhere above you on the ridge, the officers are placing the army in its positions. The arrangement that took 3 days of marching and 3 days of scouting and a night of French cavalry coming close enough to draw a crossbow bolt out of a nervous sentry to finally bring into being. The arrangement that says, this is the ground, these are the archers, this is where the horses will break. But you're not thinking about this yet. You're eating your bread. You're standing on your feet. Your feet are in good condition. Everything begins there. Grufford comes to you before the files move off. He brings a small amount of the sphagnum moss. More than yesterday, a double handful. Moist and compressed in the way it compresses when you squeeze the water from it and it comes back slightly firmer. For the rain, he says, it absorbs. It absorbs. But also, in wet ground, wet moss against the foot is different from dry cloth. The cloth loses its friction when it's wet. The moss keeps it. The moss is already wet. It's always somewhat wet, that's its nature. And so the rain doesn't change what it's doing, it just continues. He hands you enough for the boot toe and heel, and you fit it alongside the cloth, and you feel the difference when you step. The moss, compressed, resilient, taking the moisture as an expected condition rather than an intrusion. Your grandmother's grandmother, you say. He looks at you. You said she passed it mouth to ear. Plantain, moss. How far back does it go? He thinks about this for longer than you expected. Not performing thought, actually considering, actually reaching back through what he knows and what he was told and what's told to the person who told it to him. We have a word, he says. Hirith. There's no English word for it. It means a longing for something that may never have existed as you imagine it. A homesickness for a home you can't return to. Something like that. He pauses. The knowledge of the moss is Hirith. It comes from somewhere so far back that the somewhere doesn't have a name anymore. It's just before. Before writing, before the Romans, before whatever the word before means when you go back far enough. And it still works. And it still works. That's the remarkable thing. The thing from before works in the same conditions and for the same reasons as it always worked. Because the foot hasn't changed. The foot is the constant. Everything else, the wars, the languages, the roads, the shoes, the armies, those change. The foot remains. He goes back to his file. You press the moss into place. You tie the lace. You stand up. The Crécy ridge is pale in the wet morning light. The windmill turning slowly. The long slope of the hill visible down to where the road comes up out of the trees, and the French army, somewhere in those trees, is making its own preparations. You are ready. The feet are ready. Whatever comes up that slope, it will find you standing. Sleep. Good night.